across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk, the home of common sense. And as usual, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, always appreciate your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. If you do miss anything of the show, you can just check out our YouTube page for the show, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You've got no excuses. It's really easy to find. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about, well, plotting at number 10 as allies of Keir Starmer have now warned the Labour plotters that they could trigger a general election if they ousted him. The warning follows a day of chaos inside Downing Street as an attempt to, by certain number 10 staff, to scare off potential rival Wes Streeting completely backfired. Fingers are pointed at the PM's top aide, Morgan McSweeney, who's facing calls from some Labour MPs as well as the Tories to be fired from his job. And it's now understood that Keir Starmer has reached out and apologised to his Health Secretary after the day of accusations. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do you think amid the chaos and the plotting in number 10 is the answer to replace the Chief of Staff? A second one is the answer to replace the Prime Minister, and if so, who with? Or is the answer to replace the whole government? Maybe we should just have a general election. After all, Keir Starmer was the man who, after the Brexit referendum, with that very, very clear 52% vote for Brexit, for leave, said that voters didn't really know what they were voting for, so they should get a second referendum to decide what they were voting for. Well, you could argue that voters who were so fed up with the chaos and uselessness of the last Tory government didn't really know what they were voting for when they voted in a massive load, 400 plus Labour MPs to take over. I don't think they realised what they were getting either. So maybe we should have another election. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate altogether now, and text cost one, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about the Epstein files. Have we learned anything new about who knew what when about Virginia Giuffre, and what did Trump do or not do? But also pressure mounting on the BBC ahead of tomorrow's deadline for that apology to President Trump and that retraction for doctoring that speech he made ahead of the January 6th riots. It's understood the BBC is prepared to formally issue that apology with a $1 billion lawsuit hanging over their heads. Plus, shocking footage of one of central London's busiest high streets has shown it recently been transformed into a shanty town with long lines of tents housing homeless migrants. Well, I mean, on the plus side, at least they're not sitting outside my local train station, which is what they usually seem to do. We'll talk about that. Plenty more besides, lots of top guests, including Reform's Deputy Leader Richard Tice and the former Labour MP, now Independent MP Rosie Duffield as well. An awful lot going on in the show, and I'm delighted to say, joining me for the entire show, for the first time in this role, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, you look, Conservative Home was basically the website representing the grassroots Tory members, and you guys had a pretty rough time of it over the last few years. I think a lot of time actually trying to give, should we say, wise advice to those at the top of the Tory party as they just swap their leaders every few minutes and absolute chaos and incompetence. I don't think it was a surprise to you or any of your website, readers and subscribers that that the Tories were ousted in July 24. No. Has it been a surprise to you just how bad Labour have been, given they promised change, but it seems to make it even worse than before?
Yeah, I suppose yes is the answer. I gave Labour personally a very, very straight bat ahead of the general election. There were signs that things would probably end up going wrong eventually.
Those signs being
the
Keir Starmer was involved.
the failure to make any big controversial commitment during the general election. My sort of personal theory is that basically all of this is karma for 2017. Because in 2017, Theresa May called that general election, had a 25-point lead in the polls. And being Theresa May, she sort of very dutifully went, well, I will do the responsible thing and I am going to try and get a mandate for social care. Labour branded that the dementia tax and she almost lost that election. Yeah. And that meant that you had 2 years in which Labour was obviously going to win the next election. The condition of the public finances was obvious, But Starmer not only refused to make any controversial decisions, but he and Rachel Reeves allowed themselves to be bounced by Jeremy Hunt, who was then Chancellor, into ruling out all of the tax rises that
all
they
of the
were,
major widespread ones.
Basically the big revenue taxes, VAT, income tax, national insurance, the ones that lots of people pay. And so that was going to go wrong eventually. But the fact that it's gone wrong so quickly. I mean, the weird thing is, you know, when Labour first came in, I'm like, oh, you know, goodness, how am I going to cover this? I've been covering the Conservatives forever, and then all of a sudden it's government in chaos. Is this mayor the answer? And you're like, oh, okay, actually, I know this one.
Yeah, I've been here before, and I mean, Andy Burnham was supposed to be batting head of the Labour Party conference. Now it's Wes Streeting again. We were discussing on the show yesterday. The Health Secretary is a fantastic media performer, batted it out of the park effortlessly, looking very leadershipy. You could is that a word? On the airwaves yesterday, and then we had Keir Starmer. I mean, 3 of Kemi Badenoch's 6 questions yesterday were about this plotting. Now in danger. Well, you know, either you knew that your Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney was putting out these senior sources briefings to numerous media organisations about plotting by Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, and Ed Miliband, or you didn't know. Well, on either ground, McSweeney has to go, does he not? But he's seen as some sort of brilliant, I mean, you know, Mendelssohnian figure, isn't he, in the Labour Party? He won us the election. No, I'll tell you who won the election. The Tory party won you the election. That's the reality. Because we've seen once they're actually in charge, he's now Chief of Staff, they are apparently utterly incompetent to turn things around. They think that the solution to low growth is even lower growth. The solution to wildly, overdone spending is to spend more. The solution to vastly higher taxes than we've ever seen before is to put them up even more. And the solution to huge borrowing costs is to borrow more. That's not where the British public is.
No, I think to an extent what's happened is they've essentially just overestimated the extent to which what happened over the last few years was the result of their personal genius, right? Because you can see Starmer takes over by running from the left, then he boxes the left out as he moves the Labour Party to the centre.
What genius!
And then he wins this historic majority, right? It's just Blair all over again. But of course the difference between now and 1997 is that Blair inherited a strongly growing economy with very low taxes and so could spend 10 years hosing money at the public, which it turns out voters like. And also
but without them feeling the pain.
Well, indeed.
There were still oil revenues and city revenues.
But also taxes had historically been very low under the Conservatives. And so nowadays you're introducing tax rises on people in the depths of a cost of living crisis when taxes are already high. That's a big difference. But also, this majority is big in Parliament, but it's the most marginal majority Parliament in terms of seat majorities since 1945. Now, I don't think that delegitimises the government. I think there was a bit of cope from some of the Tories about the Loveless landslide. But it is nonetheless a fact.
Under our system, they have every right to be ruling.
But it is nonetheless a fact that you have hundreds of Labour MPs with very, very slender majorities, and therefore...
Including Wes Streeting. I mean, one of the key things, actually, if you want to be the leader of any political party, is you've got to have a safe seat, so you don't have to spend your entire time trying to shore up your safe seat. And he's got, majority of, 500 odd, and he's facing challenges from, all sides, including from, the, Gaza MP candidate, on the left. And that's the issue, isn't it? The reality is anyone who would take over from Keir Starmer going to be more competent or saner? Because the reality is, Angela Rayner still plotting, as the ousted Deputy Prime Minister. I'm sure David Lammy, David Lammy's humorous. I mean, he definitely thinks he's a player. David, sweetheart, no. Even if your own parents won't tell you, trust me, it's never going to happen. But, Shabana Mahmood talks the talk, quite impressive. But she, you've got to actually deliver on something. She's not delivered, not done anything. Wes Streeting absolutely appears to be the grown-up in the room, but at the end of the day, again, he's been, absolutely pandering to the pro-Palestinians lot. That, I'm sorry, that's a deal-breaker for me, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know whether he'd win back votes. Is there any... Ed Miliband, at the end of the day, this is a party... The party membership voted for Jeremy Corbyn for a few short years ago. Those people have not all left. There is every chance they would vote for the left-wing candidate, and that would be Ed Miliband. It would be hilariously fun as a journalist. As a British citizen and a taxpayer, it would be a disaster.
I agree. I managed to get odds of 40-1 on Ed Miliband being our next Prime Minister.
What did you put down?
The other week, I put down 100 quid.
And what? Wow!
Essentially, because I think it's actually
you're the only person who's going to be better off if Ed Miliband becomes Prime Minister.
Well, I think it's called emotional hedging. But essentially, if you look at it, two-stage process. Do you think Starmer can go before the next election? Obviously, but then it was ironically Miliband who abolished the internal college Labour used to have. It's
Yeah.
now a straight members vote. If you look at the
After candidates are selected by the MPs.
Indeed. So in the final round, I mean, yeah. And then if you look at the Labour list have a version of the Conservative Home Cabinet League table that we've been running for years. Ed Miliband is consistently 20, 30 points clear of everyone
Yeah.
else in it. So I think it's actually really plausible. But of course, he's not going to fix it.
Sorry, everybody.
I know.
Ruining your Thursday morning.
I should have maybe given a content warning before I flashed that information up for people. But the big problem.
We'd like to apologise for the gore on air.
but even if you put in Shabana Mahmood or Wes Streeting, the fact is that Labour MPs have shown that they are not prepared to do even the smallest amount of spending cuts.
5 billion
Right.
welfare cuts was, drop in the ocean.
Trivial, and they can't even do that. The tax rises that Rachel Reeves are going to do isn't going to fix anything either. Basically, British public spending is on a completely unsustainable trajectory, and part of the problem is Starmer didn't reconcile any of his MPs to this before the general election by telling them it was going to happen.
And he promised the voters the world.
Exactly. So if someone else came in, the MPs would be exactly the same. They'd say we didn't vote, we didn't come.
The in tray is exactly the same.
Yeah. The in tray is exactly the same. The willingness of Labour backbenchers to cut spending is also unchanged, which means at best you end up with someone like Streeting having to have a general election on a mandate of spending cuts.
Good luck with that.
Exactly. So no, I actually don't think in the short term, obviously having someone who's better at the media day to day is going to palliate the problem. But no, the problems with this government are structural and they're not going to be changed by a change of personnel.
Very interesting. And also we've got the economic growth figures. Remember, steely focus on growth, 0.1%. Well, I love it. It's even lower than they were predicting, which was 0.2%. Let's go party in the street if it was 0.2%. That's okay. On a mathematical technicality, that is growth. That's not growth. That's flatlining.
It is. One, that the British economy basically varies around zero, and so politicians just get very excited. But also, this is the non-per capita figure. And people get very bored when I talk about this, but it is important because you have overall GDP, and then you have GDP divided by the number of people in the country.
And we've had, an extra, how many people? We got extra 2 or 3 million in the last couple of years.
Right, exactly. In 1 year it was something like a net 700, 800,000, right? And so if you're managing 0.1% growth, while you're bringing 800,000 people into the country, you're actually getting poorer.
Again, I've always liked to make this point on the show, as all those people who are coming to this country, both legally and illegally, are all highly paid engineers and doctors. I'm sure they're making a net contribution, Henry, and I will not have anyone say anything different.
Sorry.
Because we don't like facts anymore. It's absolutely fascinating. Look, number 10 is in a lot of trouble. BBC in a lot of trouble. By all accounts, they are ready to issue that apology to Donald Trump. I don't know why it's taken them so long. They have already said sorry. 2 people have lost their jobs. Well, they're still there defending everything at the BBC, in Tim Davie and Deborah Turness. Talking on the show yesterday, Donald Trump did an interview on American TV, basically saying, look, I feel an obligation to sue. There's no doubt there's going to be a payout of some sort. OK, it's not going to be $1 billion, but it could well be in the tens of millions or low millions. That's our money. Should the BBC pay a single penny?
The way that defamation law works is that they would probably have to. I don't think that we can simply... I don't know if there's a rule that means that we can simply say that they can't. If he takes them to court and they're found to have defamed him, which I think...
It's under Florida law.
Because you can...
There are some difficulties, because actually there are lots of court cases in America and there are lots of stuff going on in the Senate,
but you can
which actually suggests that this programme wasn't shown in America by all accounts, and it didn't actually say anything different to what a lot of other people in America said.
Can he not sue in the British courts?
No, he's passed the deadline was mid-October or late October.
Because there is a sort of global problem.
Makes you wonder about the timing of that all coming out, I thought.
It's interesting because there is actually generally a problem with the fact that our courts we're known for libel tourism. Because people will come and sue because our laws are so egregious. If there's a finding in an American court, I actually don't know what the legal basis is for the BBC.
But either way, it'll be our money. That's the thing, it'll be our money.
I suppose they can take it from BBC America.
Exactly. Well, Donald Trump is, of course, I think they're going to end up settling of some sort, aren't they? Donald Trump is also in the news over Epstein and this latest tranche of Epstein files. Now, there's this tit for tat going on between the Democrats and the Republicans, and we saw the White House press secretary Catherine Leavitt, really giving it welly yesterday about how these documents that have been released that basically claimed that Donald Trump had spent hours at the home of Jeffrey Epstein with an unnamed quote victim, later named as Virginia Giuffre, pointing out that Virginia Giuffre, now sadly dead, that she had actually issued public statements claiming no wrongdoing by Donald Trump at any time, and had been perfectly professional with her at all times. So who knows what? But then overnight, tens and tens of thousands of documents and files released, each of which containing huge numbers of pages overnight. Have we learned anything new? Because there's this claim that this photo of Andrew with Virginia Giuffre is real. Oh, come on, we all thought it was real anyway, even though Prince Andrew denied it. But Prince Andrew having such a strong track record of being proven true in everything he said. But these other claims, I mean, how damaging is it to Trump, and how much does it matter?
I think the fact that the Democrats, one, they did that very selective leak of 3 of the emails first, and that sort of tactic doesn't work if you're going to have to release the rest of the documents eventually. It is also unhelpful for them that Virginia Giuffre, as you say, has been very, very clear that Donald Trump never did anything wrong, which means that if you're like, but Donald Trump spent lots of time with Virginia Giuffre, it's like, well, what, being professional? So I don't know how much damage that will do.
Exactly. She made that statement. She's never retracted that statement.
Exactly. And we know that Virginia Giuffre is not afraid to go after powerful people.
No.
So I think.
But also we know that there are loads of senior Democrat figures who've had the finger pointed at them.
Well, exactly. I think the issue with stories like this is you mentioned tens of thousands of documents, each of which has dozens or more pages, right? And the newspapers all want to get onto that story, but no one's had time to read all of that stuff.
Well, I assumed when I woke up this morning that I would wake up to amazing headlines of stuff they'd found in this tranche of documents.
And they might come in the next couple of days, but with the best will in the world, if I handed you 23,000 documents and said, you've got 12 hours, Julia, I want you to go and find the needle.
Get an espresso.
Find the needle in this haystack. I couldn't do it. And so I suspect if there is any interesting stuff in here, it may come out over the next couple of days. It's not really surprising it's not in the overnight.
No, absolutely. We shall wait and see anything more comes out. I mean, I assume every journalist in the world is looking at this stuff, and the whole teams of people, researchers at newspapers in America are going through it all and finding something. But again, I think everyone just knows that there were far too many important men who were involved, far too many people who knew, and everyone's pointing the finger. And I mean, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist ever on anything other than the fact that I don't believe for a nanosecond that Jeffrey Epstein took his own life, because very, very, very powerful billionaires who've got out of everything in the past and have committed horrendous acts and have still managed to live their lifestyle and be hanging out with princes and billionaires and former presidents don't take their own lives because they think they're going to beat the rap. That's the only thing I've ever been a conspiracy theorist on in my life.
I mean, I think that's perfectly plausible if you look at the prison, the fact that all of the security cameras were turned off and everything else. But also, do you remember the Panama Papers from a few years ago? The journalist who dug those up got blown up by a car bomb in Malta, right? It's not common, but these things do happen. And I think sometimes, obviously conspiracy theories can be hugely damaging in news, but I think sometimes there is a tendency to overcorrect a little bit and be like, there is never any conspiracy.
It's nearly always down to incompetence, folks. It really is. So when it comes to our
conspiracy theories are the great optimists.
Yes, exactly. I know. You just don't think they're that bad. It's like the number 10 plot. No, really, they are just that rubbish. They really are. Let's talk about the doctors' strike, because tomorrow, first day of 5-day strikes by the resident doctors, used to be called junior doctors. They have had in total a 29% pay rise, 22% one year, 22.1% and 5% plus another year. They're still claiming that they're, way fifth poorer than they were in 2008. They particularly choose this one date, which completely skews whether actually they're no worse off than the rest of us are after years of not just austerity, pay freezes and inflation. They really aren't, and they're certainly a lot better off in terms of pay restoration than most public sector workers. Now, I've got skin in the game. I'm a doctor's daughter. I think doctors who've done a hell of a lot of work to get into medical school, a hell of a lot of training to do a really important job, I think they should be paid really well. I don't have any issue with that. I think, given that there's a shortage of them willing to work, I think there's a very strong argument more of them should be paid well. I think more of them should work full-time, because if you're worried about money, maybe work full-time and stop bleating about, I can't pay my mortgage on 3 days a week. No, funny that, most people can't. But Wes Streeting, the health secretary, is the only person in the country shocked that the doctors came back for more after taking the first pay cut rise he gave them. And he's accused the doctors' union, the BMA, of behaving like a cartel. And the evidence is really very clear that they don't have the level of support they've had previously. Do you think doctors may have overplayed their hand?
Well, the problem with that is that they just remain with vast leverage because they have the ability to shut down the NHS. And any government that wants to take on the BMA over this has to account for the fact that ultimately the public will just want the NHS to open again, right? But the BMA are a cartel, right? This country
aren't all unions
no,
like that?
Well, private sector unions these days don't tend to be because they don't have that power. Public sector unions, it's
I suppose even the teachers have got a whole variety of unions.
Exactly, they have a variety of unions. But in this case, the BMA literally negotiates with the government to restrict the number of training places we have for new doctors, right?
And then complain that we don't have enough doctors.
And that is cartel behaviour, right? And you have the fact that, for example, they're complaining about the lack of training places for resident doctors, but it's not. They can't train in private hospitals in this country. Why don't we simply pass a law that says that a private hospital can take on a junior doctor to do their training placement? There's all of these things where actually, if you come up with practical solutions, they're like, oh no. Actually, we just want the NHS to have infinity money, please.
But also, they constantly say about all these doctors leaving, and they're going to leave the country, and that's why we need to bolster the NHS. You go, well, hold on a minute. They're leaving the country to work in other countries like Canada, like Australia, New Zealand, where they don't have a free at the point of need health service the same way we do. They have a health service which is you actually have to pay, basically like an insurance policy, as most of the Western world does have, and where people get the care they need in a timely fashion. People survive longer with heart disease and cancer and the like than they do, way more than in this country, and the waiting lists are pretty much unheard of. And yes, the poorest people do get the same care because it's covered by the state. And they constantly criticise any move to change the NHS structure, while happily understanding these doctors want to go off and work for more pay, doing a better job in countries that don't have the same structure as us.
I mean, there was that amazing bit of research from America, from a sort of pro-NHS think tank a few years ago, which The Guardian wrote up as NHS is the best healthcare system in the Western world, except at keeping people alive.
I quoted that on Question Time and got booed.
It's incredible. They put health outcomes 10th out of 10, but everything else. I think the other thing that I think is shocking about the fact that these people go overseas that we don't really think about enough is, even though they now pay tuition fees, every medical student in this country is subsidised by the taxpayer to the tune of over £200,000, right? And I think the expectation is that investment is paid for by working in the NHS. So currently, you can be subsidised by the taxpayer, 200 and something grand, get your medical degree, take it to Australia and bank all the proceeds privately.
That said, we import a load of foreign doctors, and we those countries, or they pay for their training.
Indeed.
And we get them cheap. What annoys me is how many young people, and I've seen it among my daughter's friends, brilliant young kids who've got straight nines at GCSE, straight A's in science subjects and maths, and can't get into medical school, and then they and then we're saying we haven't got enough doctors. It's like, this is mad. Our brightest and our best are not able to train, but we'll take someone from India or someone from Nigeria who, frankly, is unlikely to be trained to the same level. That's the reality. There's one final topic I want to get to, which is driving tests. Again, gone through this with the teenager. There are two changes, because we've got a massive backlog in driving tests, particularly, in London and the southeast, but other parts of the country. A lot of it started during lockdown. Lots of youngsters couldn't get tests. But they're going to change the rules to basically stop bots booking slots and then basically selling them on. But also, they're going to bring in the armed forces. They're going to actually get driving examiners from the Defence School of Transport to basically provide tests for civilians. We've got an absurd situation where you have to wait up to 2 months to do a theory test, and you have to do your theory test before you're allowed to apply for your driving test. And wait for a driving test, certainly my daughter's was over 6 months. And then you have to apply for a date, and you just get given a date. Well, it doesn't matter if that date is the same day as one of your A-levels. Tough. So what everyone ends up doing, they sign up to these apps that cost a few quid, and then you basically, if one comes free, if a test date comes free, you can then pay to take that test date. And that's what's happening, because it's an absolute system that doesn't work. The idea that we are making people wait what is effectively, 6, 8, 9 months to be able to get a test to pass their driving skills is madness.
I mean, it is, because...
It should be something you could book next week.
I mean, it is one of the things that makes me feel like an old man, because it would not even have occurred to me when I got my driving licence that this is a thing that could become an impossible thing to get. But also, driving instructors are presumably not hugely difficult to train, right? And therefore you'd expect...
With all due respect,
if there was if there's this massive pent-up demand, what you'd expect to happen is you'd have like businesses that provided the tests expanding, but it's not business.
No, because it's the state.
It's the state.
It's the state, and therefore there's that bottleneck.
Exactly,
yeah.
And so I think I read in this story that they've hired several hundred new people, but because of people leaving, they've only actually added 40 to the total number of instructors. They're bringing in these defence instructors, which aren't military; they're civil servants from the Ministry of Defence. But again, it's like we desperately raid the Defence Department for every
if in
time
doubt,
there's a
bring
crisis.
them in.
Exactly, right? Sandbags, driving tests.
I just think a country that can't even enable young people. And again, look, I live in London. It's not a big deal to have to be able to have a driving licence for where we live. I know lots of people who they live in the middle of nowhere. Their parents have been getting up at 6 a.m. to drive them to college, to school, whatever. They need their kids to be able to be independent.
To get
a job. Lots of people literally can't get work without a driving licence. But most people drive to work, drive back from work, get to college and things. It is absolutely absurd. It's just another symptom of just totally inadequate, failing system and inability to deal with it. But if in doubt, bring the military in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. If you've had trouble booking a driving test for your youngster, maybe give us a call. I want to hear from you particularly, though, on the chaos at Number 10. It was all the subject of PMQs yesterday. It's all over the front pages again today. Well, we've got a small matter of massive inflation, unemployment at 5%, 1,000 people a day losing their jobs. We've got an extra million people, now 4 million people in total on universal credit with no requirement to even look for work. All that, and instead of the Chief of Staff, the Prime Minister, focusing on dealing with all of that and the small matter of millions of people on waiting lists and all of that, no, instead of dealing with that, just basically briefing newspapers, a little bit of plotting about trying to shore up the Prime Minister's position. Is the answer to this chaos, this plotting in Number 10, is the answer replace the Chief of Staff, a second one? Is the answer to replace the Prime Minister? Or is the answer to replace the whole government? Do we need a general election? Do we just need a new leader? And if so, who? Who you rate from the Labour front bench? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Call now. We'll get you on air. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense, 10:32 is the time. Let's get a couple of your messages and calls. Chris has got in touch when I'm asking you, amid the chaos and plotting of number 10, what's the solution? Chris says 100% of the government needs reforming. Too many useless councillors and members of Parliament, not to mention the amount of waste that goes on. Harry says replace the whole spiteful and inept lot. And Will says probably not, but I'm sick of seeing Starmer's face the smug brick. Just checking I'm reading that correctly. Smug brick. Dave says replace the whole Parliament. Sam says I'm not a fan of this government, but neither am I a fan of the elected people being removed unless it's for a very good reason. Very good point, Sam. And Liz says replace the entire political class, but start with the current government. Robert is on the line. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000 to have his say. Robert's in Hertfordshire. Morning to you, Robert. What do you want to tell us?
Yeah, good morning. I just want you to consider this. At the beginning of World War II, we declared war on Germany because they marched into Poland. But we knew who the enemy was. It was a funny little bloke across the water with a funny little moustache. And
who we learned today did have one testicle. That's in the news today. I kid you not. I kid you not.
We knew who the enemy was. He wasn't. We didn't have Germans living over here in hotels. We didn't have German grooming gangs. We knew who the enemy was. It's as simple as that. And it was much more easy. I'm not being disrespectful for the people who lost all their lives, in the war, and I'm grateful for that. But in a way, this is worse. And your researcher said to me on the phone, well, who is the enemy then coming up? Because I said, you tell me. I don't know.
You're talking about the enemy within, almost.
Well, the enemy that's coming in. Look, as we're talking now, they're heading towards us in a boat for Kent, right or wrong?
It looks sunny out there, so right.
Right, and the thing is as well, in answer to your question, we need to dissolve this Parliament quick. We can't wait to the next general election. There won't be no country left. Desperate times need desperate measures. We'll worry about the war cabinet when we've done it. You need to get rid of this government, and then we can sort it out from there. We need to.
Do you know what? I quite like a sort of government of national unity where they all agreed we're going to have to slash spending and we're going to have to deal with borrowing. We're going to have to get to grips with, borders and things. And just, this stuff shouldn't even be party political, should it? Robert, appreciate your call. I mean, dire warnings there. There won't be a country left by the next election if we don't take action. There we are. I'll put some of that to my next guest who's coming up in just a few moments, Trevor Kavanagh, former of The Sun. We'll get to him in just a couple of moments. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. Trevor Kapler joins us now. He's former political editor of The Sun. A very good morning to you, Trevor.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, where do we start? Look, you and I, we've been around a long time. We've counted them in, we've counted them out. What do you make of the plotting and the chaos at number 10? I'll put the question to you, I'm putting to our audience as well. Is the answer to replace the Chief of Staff, the PM or the whole government?
Well, a few days ago only, I would have said that Keir Starmer's been on the verge of being booted out ever since he was elected, hasn't he? I would have said he would have probably lasted until the May elections, which are going to be very, very bad for Labour. But now, after what's happened in the last 24 hours, I'm wondering whether he'll last till Christmas. I mean, the budget is going to be a huge hurdle for this government. It's going to be either bad news on the day or it will become clear within days that it's bad news generally.
Yeah.
And it's something that will involve a lot of broken promises. And that's what this government is now identified with. I mean, whatever happened to truth, honesty, integrity and accountability?
When did we have that in British politics?
Well, we did. I mean,
when?
Look, I'm even older than you. I'm a lot older than you.
I didn't know that was possible.
I can remember back decades before when people actually took responsibility for their errors. Yeah. People like Lord Carrington resigned over the Falklands, for goodness sake.
True.
Can you imagine that happening today, either in the Tory party or in this particular government?
Yeah, that is a very fair point there. That really is. But this is the thing. I mean, it is absolute chaos. We all, you and I would have discussed this. I think, I saw you even on the night of the election. Everyone expected it to be a Labour victory, not quite the landslide it was, that collapse of that Tory vote. But I think we all knew they would be a bit rubbish. But I don't think anyone thought they were going to be this bad. But the Prime Minister, I mean, he's got a Chief of Staff who's plotting against a senior member of his cabinet. Particularly foolish, like doing that briefing when Wes Streeting was on the media round and is a absolutely brilliant media performer and batted it away, looking rather more like a leader than Keir Starmer did at PMQs yesterday. He just handed a weapon to the opposition and to opposition with his own party. But if you've got a Chief of Staff when you've got 0.1% growth, which is in that, and as Henry Hill, who's with me, pointed out, that's not even per capita. So we're worse than flatlining. You've got unemployment up, inflation still high. You've got welfare bills ballooning, debt ballooning, all of the problems we've got. NHS waiting list, coming down, but at the slowest pace ever. Strikes going on. I mean, you name it, everything is going wrong. And the Chief of Staff in number 10 has got time to do plotting against a potential future, leadership plotter. I mean, that he should be sacked on the spot, shouldn't he?
Well, he should be, but if he did, so would Keir Starmer. They're twinned. I mean, one goes with the other. This clumsy, bungled attempt to cut Wes Streeting off at the knees has actually given his leadership chance his legs. It's an amazing act of appalling political judgment here. And everyone's piling in. As you said, Ed Miliband is now saying that Morgan McSweeney's got to be sacked. Well, he's not saying this because he thinks that he wants Wes Streeting as the next leader. And he doesn't really want Keir Starmer to remain as leader. He wants to be leader, despite his protestations to the opposite.
And he went so well last time he was leader.
I know. We all realised we missed out there, didn't we?
No, but that's it. They're all up to it, aren't they? What do you make of the claim, which gets more allies of Keir Starmer apparently are talking about how, but if there were a change of leadership, there would have to be a general election. I mean, certainly they called for general elections when the Tories kept changing their leaders. Constitutionally, there doesn't have to be a change of leader. But is there anyone in the Labour Party who could feasibly get elected? I mean, that's a big, proviso as leader of the party, who could change Labour's fortunes.
Well, I think that Wes Streeting is probably the best of the bunch. And I think that because of that, and because there are people in the party like Ed Miliband who are totally on the other side of the political spectrum, he's unlikely to get it because the party at large, which will have a big say, likes Ed Miliband. I mean, the rest of the country hates Ed Miliband, but that's irrelevant in this. I mean, what this has suddenly brought upon us is the realization, which has dawned on us, that we could actually be facing another election much sooner than we expected, and that concentrates the mind, because we've assumed we've got 2 or 3 years for Nigel Farage to get his policy act together, for the Conservatives to do whatever they need to do to become a serious party of opposition again. And suddenly, if we did have an election, say, in the early new year,
Good God.
would those parties be ready to actually fight back and present us with an alternative government? And I worry that at this stage, Nigel Farage hasn't quite put all the nuts and bolts together.
No, they haven't got the policy, but they are planning for a 2027 election. We're going to be talking to Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform, in an hour or so's time. But as you say, that said, given the state of the polls right now, would Labour backbenchers be voting to dissolve Parliament? Because it's not going to happen without them voting for it. And they dissolve Parliament and then risk losing their own seats. At the end of the day, they want to pay their mortgages too.
Well, I mean, look, there would be turkeys voting for Christmas, but on the other hand, they're going to have to get rid of Keir Starmer. They know that. They know they can't go into the next election with him as leader. And so really there's no good time to get rid of him, now or after the May elections. Yeah. It's still bad for Labour because, I mean, they're going to be annihilated in the local elections. What happened if they changed leader then? There'd still be a demand for an early general election from that point onwards. So basically, they're biding their time. So you're quite right. You might as well carry on drawing your pay for a while until you're finally redundant, as many will be, rather than meeting it too soon.
What do you make of some other little troublesome issues for the Prime Minister? One is his ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, rebuking the Prime Minister over the appointment of a Labour donor to the position of football regulator. He said it was regrettable that he approved David Cogan to the position, even though he'd agree because he's received so much hospitality from football clubs. But there's also an issue involving Tim Allen, the new sort of senior sort of director of communications man I know you'll know well from Blairite years, in Number 10, and his still close links with the lobbying firm that he founded alongside Tom Baldwin, another former Labour advisor, but also a journalist. I mean, there just seems to be just sort of, I don't know, issues everywhere coming out of the woodwork.
Well, as I said earlier, what happened to truth, accountability and integrity? I mean, this is yet another example of Labour doing things they accuse the Tories of basically breaking the law over. And we've had such a catalogue of these mistakes, misdemeanors. And in my case, actually, I think that this is far worse. I think we've got a government which is very sleazy. It has no credibility. I think it has no integrity. And I think that the fact that they've lost a minister for housing, or because of her juggling the rent, we've lost a minister for business integrity. I mean, it's for corruption, for being corrupt. I mean,
well, allegations.
Of course. I mean, that's why she went anyway, because of those allegations, which have yet to be proved or refuted properly. Yeah. However, the simple fact is that this government goes on a daily basis from one of these horrible crises to another. And our reputation abroad, I think, has taken a hell of a pasting as a result. Oh,
well, I'm just hoping people aren't noticing. Oh, just finally, in terms of reputations and lack of integrity and hopelessness, BBC looks like they are going to issue that apology to Donald Trump and then not face a $1 billion lawsuit. Now, whether or not Donald Trump would be able to sue for that amount or get that amount, whether he'd even win that lawsuit, is it right the BBC do apologise, do retract and do, in all likelihood, pay some sort of damages to the Prime Minister, even though that's your and my money as licence fee payers?
Well, I think that this would have been no problem at all, a storm in a teacup, if they'd done any of these things several months earlier, when it all became abundantly clear to them from the Michael Prescott detailed analysis of their misdemeanors, from Trump through trans rights, through racism. And all the BBC had to do was say, yes, look, we're taking this on board, we're dealing with it, even though, frankly, they wouldn't and won't, even after an apology to Trump or an admission, as they've made today, that they've been dealing clumsily with the issue of trans rights. Nothing will change, I'm sorry, with the present attitude, the sort of the imbued feeling that they have the right answers to everything, the world view, human rights, immigration, you name it, they know better than the public
Oh,
do.
yes, absolutely. Trevor Kavanagh, always so good to talk to you. Voice of reason there, former political editor of The Sun. Let me bring back in Henry Hill, deputy editor of Conservative Home. I mean, either on the BBC or Number 10, I'd say very similar problems. They think they're holier than thou, better than us, and actually they're just rampantly incompetent, I would say. What do you want to add?
I think the extraordinary thing is we were discussing the problem of people not just apologising and owning things early enough, and with the BBC, it's that Dr. Twistage was just so egregious, and I think that
It's a fundamental breach of basic journalism.
Right.
That's literally what you learn on day one.
I was flabbergasted when I saw it, because look, I have a rosy view of the BBC than some Conservatives, and I have historically defended it, and I still do. I think it's an important and salvageable institution. But when I saw that, and it was a seamless edit,
it's deliberate.
Right? And so often in the early days after that broke, the people who came on to defend the BBC, including former BBC journalists, they'd be saying, well, obviously the show made a mistake, but did you know that Donald Trump, the Democrats have voted that he did try to... It's like, this doesn't matter. And the fact that you're evading it has actually made this so much worse, because actually journalists, bloodhounds though we can sometimes be, we do tend to give credit to a proper apology given immediately. And as you say, if the BBC had said from the beginning, this is a very serious document, the full dossier, this is a very serious document and we're going to interrogate it.
I don't think they needed the dossier. I think they could have listened to the complaint so long. At the end of the day, it's very obvious to me that either Deborah Turness nor Tim Davie nor anyone else at the top of the BBC remotely accepts what they've done wrong in any different field, with coverage of Gaza, trans issues, whatever, Donald Trump, you name it. I think they haven't got not a clue that they are a biased organisation, and that's the bit that's scary to me, I have to say. 10:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about a major shopping area in London which has been turned into tent city with dozens of homeless migrants' tents. But why is this happening in our capital? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 10:53 is the time. Let's talk about yet another migrant tent city that has been set up in our capital, a major shopping hub. Tottenham Court Road, you may have heard of it. It's just north of Oxford Street, on the way to Euston Station. Absolutely now covered. If you're watching on the TV, on the YouTube, you'll be able to see huge number of tents that have set up now, basically filled with foreign migrants, homeless migrants, often getting the tents, by the way, from charities. Often those charities supported by us, the taxpayer, and basically setting up a small shanty town in the capital of our city in the West End. Well, let's talk about this with Guy Dampier. He's a senior researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Institute. Morning to you, Guy.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, I mean, I'm pleased to see some of these people are there and not outside my local supermarket where they set up tents, and everyone was feeling very sorry for them. But I used to do an early shift on this very station, and quite a few times in the morning I'd pop out at 5 in the morning from a cab and just check, and no, they weren't there at night. They were in their council flats at night. I mean, that was the reality. So I made that very clear to the police and with photographic evidence and got them removed. But a lot of these people, people might feel very sorry. They go, look how awful these people are living like this, but do any of these people even have a right to be in this country?
Well, it seems like a lot of them will. Looking at the demographics that have been explored, a lot of them are Romanian, a lot of them are Bulgarian. Presumably what we're talking about is Roma gypsies. Some of them are from further afield. There are some men apparently there who are from Arab background, and there's also at least one Colombian. Now, the question is what exactly their immigration status is. The Romanians and the Bulgarians probably do have the right to be here under the EU settlement scheme, although many people would reasonably ask, if you're destitute and begging on the streets, why are you here in the first place? And then the Colombian and the Arabs.
But also, by the way, you can get a job if you're legally here. You can. I have this conversation with beggars all the time. I say, so where are you from? Romania. Okay, so you can get a job then. Go and get a job.
Yeah, well, they don't want to get a job. This is the job they've got. It's a lot easier for them. I mean, I agree, they should. But if they're not going to get a job, and if they're going to live on the street, which is not good for them and not good for us, we should simply deport them as destitute foreigners, which you used to be able to do, but you no longer can. And then when it comes to the Colombian and the Arabs, I would presume, although we don't know, that they are successful asylum seekers. Yeah. In which case, again, there's questions. If you're an asylum seeker, if you're a refugee and you're successful, you can apply to the council for housing.
And they have a duty to house you. Okay, it may not be nice accommodation, but it'd be better than living in the tents. The reality is there is now a whole living being made by, let's face it, organised crime gangs in sending these people out to beg, often, selling the big issue. And begging on the streets, and there is a lot of these people, you could say, are being exploited, but the people who feel all sort of do-goodery and want to help these people by giving them money and labelling them to be on the streets and continue to be used this way, they're not actually helping them, are they?
No, I mean, it's the same as having a member of the family who's drunk. They might be broke, but you wouldn't give them money because
here's some vodka
and booze.
Yeah, exactly. That's the reality. But also, look, I mean, you get fined in my, if my local council, if you leave your bin on the street for an extra day, and well, I wish they'd do a bit more of that, frankly. You get fined if you drop a bit of litter. But oh no, feel free to just set up your home on the street or in a public place at any time, and the police do nothing. It's not like these people are hiding. They are there in plain sight for every passing pedestrian, every passing driver to see, and the police don't do anything. And whether people are here legally or not legally, whether they're destitute or not, you don't have a right to just pitch a tent anywhere you damn well feel like it.
Definitely. I mean, they're breaking a lot of rules to do so. The difficulty, like a lot of these things, is there's a sort of anarcho-tyranny to this. If you're someone that goes and works, you've got a job, you've got things you can lose, you've got a family, a mortgage, whatever else, you don't want to get in trouble. These guys, they don't have that. And what's more, as you mentioned, they've got a lot of charities and a lot of other groups backing them up who'll be quite happy to pay for lawyers to make a fuss of it. And you'll get to issues like, for example, a tent can be considered a private residence. Well, under certain human rights laws, the police can't enter because you're private residence unless you give them permission.
Sorry. We're in clown country territory here. We are in clown country territory. Are you serious?
This was a major issue with the ones that were up at Hyde Park, where they were trying to move them on, but the argument was that they couldn't go inside unless they got a specific form from the council that they had to go through. Otherwise, you were going inside someone's private property without their permission.
You can't just sort of So I mean, can I just build a house somewhere in Hyde Park then? And that would be allowed, and they can't enter it. I mean, it's utter madness.
Well, the genius of the tent is that you can move it. So the thing is, it counts as private property where it is. The council can then get the form, but if you then move it 2 meters over to the right or the left, suddenly it's in a new location, and then they need a second form.
I tell you what I love is these people with their little legal advisors and all that. They're actually quite clever. They're actually, if only they use their brains to go, I don't know, get a paid job like everyone else.
It would make life much easier, wouldn't it?
Sorry, I'd like to think I've seen it all. That is, Guy, you've rendered me almost speechless. That's quite a feat. My husband will love you. I don't. What the hell is going on, Guy? Thank you so much, Guy Dampier from the Prosperity Institute. Henry Hill, help me out, mate.
I mean,
what the actual?
I mean, it's insane, isn't it? Because you'd think if the tent is the private residence, it wouldn't matter where it is because the land is public property.
Yeah.
But no, that is genuinely not the case. And that's before you get to really exciting things like adverse possession, which is where if you manage to pitch your illegal tent on land for like 15 years, you can keep it. If you don't get caught.
If anyone who's ever applied for planning permission to put up a shed or to extend their conservatory may be feeling slightly egregiously hurt at this point. Oh, we are in a clown country, people. We are in a clown country. It is that simple. I mean, wow. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do get in touch about chaos at number 10. Well, no wonder we're in chaos. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense most of the time.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Very much appreciate you joining me, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, or watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Very much appreciate you joining us. Lots to talk about. And if you miss anything from the show, if you miss last 10 minutes, conversation about Tent City and Tottenham Court Road in central London and the rights that people have, often foreign migrants, to just pitch a tent anywhere they want and the inability of the authorities to deal with it. I mean, go back and look at our YouTube page. It's called the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, never have to miss a thing. But, I mean, you will be as gobsmacked as I clearly was about that. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to talk more about the chaos at Number 10 and the plotting. I want to know, particularly from you, amid that chaos and plotting, is the answer to replace Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who did the briefing against Wed Streeting and others, is the answer to replace the Prime Minister himself? And if so, who would you replace him with? But also, is the answer just replacing the whole government? Do we need a general election? Our constitution wouldn't demand it, even if we did have a new Labour leader and thus a new Prime Minister. But is that what's needed? Give us a call. Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. I would love to hear your response to that last conversation I say about the tent city and the fact that, you know, someone moves, they can pitch their tent anywhere they want, and if they move their tent even by 2 metres, the whole legal process has to start all over again to remove them. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. I'm also going to be talking more about the BBC, not just that apology we understand is forthcoming tomorrow to Donald Trump for them basically deliberately manipulating some clips of a speech he made back in ahead of the January 6th riots in 2021. But also, I mean, this is going to blow your mind, because one senior BBC executive apparently actually admitting the broadcaster did make mistakes. I know, I'm as surprised as you did. But this is Richard Burgess, the corporation's Director of News Content. Goodness me, they've got a lot of managers, haven't they? But all on six-figure salaries paid for by you and me, by the way. But he said they have made mistakes in their coverage of transgender issues. He told journalists in an all-staff call yesterday that they must cover the gender debate impartially and consider the views of both sides. Oh, women get a say. How nice. Also, we're going to be talking more about Jeffrey Epstein and the convicted billionaire paedophiles appearing to confirm a photograph of Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, with his arm around Virginia Giuffre, was real, like we didn't all think it was real anyway. But in those leaked emails released by US Congress yesterday, the emails also revealed that Andrew told Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, "I can't take any more of this," during investigations into his alleged abuse. Of course, he has always denied everything and then paid the late Virginia Giuffre £12 million, a woman he claims he never met. As we all have done in our time, have we not? Anyway, joining me for the chat all this morning, I'm delighted to say, is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Welcome back again to you.
Thank you.
I think we're still in a bit of shock about the Tent City story. There's no doubt at all about that. Before we talk about chaos in Number 10, we must talk about a report that's been released while we've been on air. And this is a report into the horrific murder of the 10-year-old schoolgirl Sarah Sharif. She was murdered by her father, Irfan Sharif, and her stepmother, Binash Batul. They were sentenced to life in prison for her murder last year after subjecting her to years of inconceivable cruelty. She'd been beaten, burned, hooded, strangled, tortured, basically, at her home in Surrey. She was discovered dead in August 2023. Of course, it became a big story in the news, not only just the horrific murder of the child, but also, of course, that the father and stepmother fled the country and fled to Pakistan, where they were eventually arrested. The story was absolutely horrific, and there has been one of these safeguarding reviews. You know, those ones where we learn lessons so these things never happen again. And you'll never guess what? The safeguarding review has found that she was failed by the system. I know, we're all surprised, aren't we? Because once again, a child has been left in a home where she was at risk. Another one of the worrying things, the neighbours of Sarah Sharif did not report concerns about her, that she was being abused, because they were scared of being called racist. I mean, how many times have we heard that? You think the head teacher in Axel Rudakabana in the review of what happened, failing to prevent him being able to murder and attempt to murder all those girls last year. The head teacher basically said he was, he was described him as threatening and like, no, she mustn't describe him because it was playing into racist, memes. The Manchester Arena security guard who stopped that, who saw the bomber, saw Abedi with the rucksack and thought, well, what are you doing here with your big rucksack at a concert with loads of little girls from Ariana Grande, and didn't say anything because he didn't want to be accused of being racist or Islamophobic. So once again, same issues where this wasn't stopped, it wasn't prevented because of PC concerns.
Yeah. Primary school reported bruising to her face. Social services
started suddenly wearing a headscarf to hide them.
Social services closed the case in 6 days. Now, you can't get any...
They went to the wrong address, apparently.
You can't get any part of the government to conclude anything in 6 days. But apparently... I mean, I suppose reading this... I don't want to sort of rehash all of the horrible things again. I think you summarised them very well.
I think as a parent, there's a lot of this stuff you literally go, I wish I'd not read that.
It is genuinely distressing to read about what happened to this girl even now. And I think that the thing that I've been scanning this story for and I can't see is who's resigned.
Yeah.
Because the BBC, whatever you think of the BBC, two of their very top people resigned because somebody spliced together a video of Donald Trump. Girl got serially tortured and then beaten to death.
Yeah.
And now we have a report saying that actually there were a litany of failures by the social services which meant that they allowed that outcome to happen on their watch.
Yeah.
So who's resigning?
Yeah,
Whose
absolutely.
responsibility is that?
Or what's actually changed to mean this wouldn't happen? I mean, again, as you say, they reported bruising on her face. Social services, she was taken out of school. She's suddenly wearing a headscarf. I mean, come on. There were clear signs that any amateur, let alone a professional, would go, something's going wrong here. Basically, they knew that her dad had a history of domestic abuse. There were allegations against the mother as well. The child was taken by the courts away from the mother, even though the father made accusations against the mum against the dad. The child, under no circumstance, should have been left in this home. Full stop, end of, nothing to discuss. Again, for me, any child being taken out of school, there's a giveaway. We know what happened during lockdown when kids weren't able to be in school. We know more children died by being beaten to death by their parents or step-parents during lockdown than died from COVID. Otherwise healthy children. More children died from lockdown than died from COVID, other than children who very sadly were already very unwell or with other diseases. I mean, that's the reality. Children need to have the safety, and I've spoken to so many domestic abuse survivors, children in particular, who say that the outlet of going to school, a safe place, and somewhere where someone can spot that you're emaciated, you've got bruises on you where you shouldn't have bruises. They're not, I fell down in the playground bruises, and that things, they can spot that something is going wrong at home.
I mean, look, there are parents who homeschool their children responsibly. I think it's important to say, but you're right. But there is that element that you can't make up, which is that you simply put a child in a place with lots of other children, which is, I think, a good and normal thing for a child growing up, and also just with, as you say, someone who can say, you didn't have those bruises when you went home yesterday. What's going on? But that only really helps if those people feel empowered to act on that information. And we were talking about, you're asking what's changed. I mean, they haven't said what's changed. They're working to implement all local recommendations. But I think the thing is, for things like this, why you want a resignation, it's not vengeance or just getting a scalp. It's because you need that to drive change.
Well, there needs to be a penalty for people who get things wrong. But the trouble is, again, you go back, I'm thinking back to Baby P, Peter Connolly, you go back to so many other cases. Victoria Climbier, I mean, there are so many. I mean, the fact that we know their names, but we don't hear about the cases where social services do step in and the bad things don't happen. But that's we only find out when the children have been killed. We don't find about all the children who are continuing to live that life for years and years and years.
I'm not indicting all of social services.
No, they are massively overstretched, but also a lot of them are they're now they're under-resourced, overstretched. They've got like a caseload of like 30 kids. They can't visit 30 kids in the week. But they also have this thing where this urge to keep children with their parents at all costs. Well, the only one who pays the cost is the child. And there are too many failing parents. There are too many parents who are on drugs, watching horrific stuff on the internet day in, day out, neglecting their children at best and abusing their children at worst, who have no business having a child in the house. No business at all. But what do you do with the children?
I mean, that brings you on to the shortage of foster parents, of course, the difficulties with the adoption system. I don't know if this is still the case, but historically there was a very big problem with the adoption service having a very strong bias against placing a child with parents who weren't from their sort of racial and religious background. And it's like, I think that kid would probably just like to have loving parents, to be honest, rather than you keeping them in care until you can find one which matches up to their...
But also requiring that anyone who fosters or adopts, you have to give up your job. You literally not allowed to work while doing it, as opposed to actually, well, maybe it would be good for a kid to have a structure of working parent.
And it depends again. That can depend on who especially if it's an older foster child. Often they will they will have particular needs. But yeah, for younger children, parents who have their own children can go and work, and children survive. But I think the thing is, if that was what this report was saying, because I have a lot of sympathy with that argument. These services are overstretched. Social workers, a lot of them are very, very good people doing insanely hard work. We only have to read about this, as you say, when it's in the newspapers. They have to confront stuff like this every day. If this report was saying that was the problem, that they were overstretched, that they would, then it would be a very different conversation. But what we're talking about here is a culture fostered by senior leadership in which those actual frontline people didn't feel able to act on information received, and that's what has to change.
That is what's damning, absolutely. Just some breaking news for you. We had an announcement, the Telegraph site understands that Sarah Jones, the policing minister, is going to tell the Commons today that the Labour Party is going to scrap police and crime commissioners. It's a big shake-up of policing. They're going to be abolished from 2028 when the current holders come up for election. They'll be replaced by directly elected mayors, their deputies, or by police and crime boards. Now, I mean, I've got no problem with this on the basis that basically, who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? I mean, these were supposed to be people who were going to be representing local people, holding the Met chief and the chief of Liverpool and Manchester, whatever, holding local police chiefs to account and insisting that they, followed the priorities of local people. They've just become sort of political placemen and women. They haven't really done that job. And we've got, in the example of London, you've got Sadiq Khan, the London Met, is the police and crime commissioner as well. How's that working out for us?
I mean, I think there is a case for just merging it with the mayoralties, because the mayors at least have some more actual power. I think that police and crime commissioners were not actually in charge of policing. And as you say, they all went native. They would normally end up, if there was some policing scandal, you get the PCC wheeled out to defend, not all of them, but most of them were not defending the police. I think the only actual virtue of them is that that role used to be performed and will be performed again, where there's not a mayor, by a board, right? Yeah. And the only good thing about a police and crime commissioner is it's one person, and therefore people knew that they were useless. Right?
Yes, exactly.
The boards were just as useless,
and again,
but no one knew about them.
As with all these quangos, unelected, unaccountable, we don't know who they are, and as always, they're appointed from the same group of the great and the good, who have certain views and definitely think that hurty tweets are a bad thing, and people shoplifting, not really such an issue. I mean, that's the problem.
I think this is it, and I think that the thing that police and crime commissioners failed to do is provide a mechanism by which the public can try and pressure local police forces to respond to their concerns. And abolishing them because they failed, fine, but that's what we need. We need some other mechanism by which local voters can say,
we just constantly have this ridiculous situation, whether it's in the health service, whether it's in local authorities or policing, where we just constantly reform that, we change all these structures, but nothing actually changes on the ground. And what people just want is, police officers to arrest people committing crimes. They want, they want the NHS to actually deliver treatment and appointments to people. They want, they just want stuff done that they care about, and that seems to be the one thing that these bodies don't want to do. It is quite extraordinary. Look, let's talk. We need to get back to a bit of Downing Street plotting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we're talking about. You get to decide what you want to call about 0344 499 1000. But I have been asking you whether, amid the chaos and plotting in Number 10, is the answer to replace the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister himself, who with, if so, who with, or the whole government? Let's talk about the runners and riders who do want to become potential leaders. I mean, we know that Wes Streeting would love to be leader. We know that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, considers her chances. Angela Rayner, the former Deputy PM, she's still hoping. Lucy Powell, the new Deputy Leader, you're not running for that job unless you think you're a player one day. But there's also, talk about, this is extraordinary, that Ed Miliband, the man who is in charge of utterly destroying our economy single-handedly through net zero policies, he rates his chances, and he's been on the new media around this morning, and he's a big, of course course not. I've been there. I've been leader. But the reality is he does fancy his chances. He's delusional about his own ability and popularity as much as he is about net zero and climate change hysteria. But he is actually the front runner among Labour Party members. That's how terrifying it is.
Yeah. I think it's Labour list to have a version that they have a Cabinet League table, obviously inspired by the famous Conservative Home Cabinet League table back in the day. And Ed Miliband is 20 to 30 points ahead of the second most popular member of the Shadow Cabinet, which is John Healey, the Defence Secretary. I think Bridget Phillipson was third in the most recent one that I saw. So actually, he is the favourite. And there's lots of evidence that Starmer already knows this. You know, Ed Miliband, Paul Wes Streeting, tasked with single-handedly fixing the NHS. How much extra capital money does he get from Rachel Reeves? 6 billion. How much money does Ed Miliband get for carbon capture and storage? 22 billion, right? Miliband just refused to be moved during the reshuffle.
Yeah, and was able to refuse.
And was able to refuse, right? So Starmer...
What job would you want him to do?
Well, I'm not... That's a separate question, but the mere fact...
I mean, I wouldn't put him in charge of my bins.
I mean, I think historically, Northern Ireland is the sort of exile place in the cabinet. Unfairly, I think it's a wonderful bit of the world. But nonetheless, the fact that he has the abilities, as I say to the Prime Minister, I do not feel like moving from energy, is a real sign that Starmer knows that he's a threat. Right?
Because he's got that backbench support. But he's got that backbench support because they are all also loony lefties.
Well, I think it's also because he's got, and this is, I think, the problem. I don't know why anyone wants to be leader of this government. Like, honestly,
I've got to be honest with you. Like, yeah.
Why? Why do you want it? It's basically stepping into an Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Because
what do you think you're going to be able to change? But again, even Keir Starmer, like I said after the general election, and before, the inbox doesn't change.
Right. Miliband is popular because in the climate change brief, he is able to do lots of things that Labour members and MPs like, and he's not responsible for anything controversial.
Yeah.
That will stop the moment he becomes Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, everything he does is controversial to anyone who's sane and can do basic maths.
But not inside the Labour Party.
He can be Mr. Cuddly Ed Miliband saving the planet. I mean, a load of abject nonsense, of course. I mean, genuinely, I think the country would collapse within a week of him being leader. I think he's that crazy.
I think the fascinating thing is, Rachel Reeves, we're talking about the absolutely awful budget that's coming up. Rachel Reeves thinking about getting rid of the windfall levy on North Sea oil because it's collapsed revenues. She needs more money, and she's like, "Oh, I need guarantees that there'll be investment." And the North Sea oil and gas industry is like, well, Ed Miliband is still Energy Secretary. He's still banning us from drilling this stuff, and he's going to be leader. You
and I were just chatting just before the show, and we were talking about sort of where we are with Downing Street and this plotting that's going on. And you raised the budget and what could be in the budget. Explain to people what you mean about how significant this next budget's going to be in terms of why people at Number 10 might think there would be a threat to the Prime Minister.
Right, so obviously we do not know yet the whole shape of the budget. We know that there's going to be an income tax rise, but we don't know what. And what's one way to try and work out the contents of secret information? How are the people who do know it behaving? Now Downing Street, Prime Minister's senior advisors, they will know roughly what's going to be in the budget, and they are absolutely convinced that he is going to be challenged. And I think that tells us something very important. When you've got the Prime Minister's advisors fortifying the Bastille and, deploying the National Guard on the streets, you're like, OK, this is probably going to be an absolutely miserable time for the taxpayer. And that means it's going to be even worse than we think it's going to be. I mean, probably, yes. Because I've been of the view that they're sort of, mind you, again, this would be what a competent government would do, was you basically get, querying the pitch ahead, basically going, oh, it could be a 2p income tax rise, but, and then it ends up being a 1p rise, and everyone goes, oh, thank goodness. But you're saying he could even just, they're basically... Well, I think one thing preparing us for the worst. One thing which will be happening at some point and might have been what precipitated all this is that the OBR is going to give privately its scoring to Rachel Reeves about what she's proposing to do. That might have caused an absolute panic. But think about this. That income tax rise that's been floated, right, would raise $6 billion. Yeah. The fiscal black hole, sorry for overusing the term, that Rachel Reeves is trying to close is 30 billion. Yeah. I thought it was up to 40 or 50 on some records. And Labour MPs won't vote for 5 billion of spending cuts. Mm-hmm. So that means that she has to find tens of billions of pounds worth of revenue. So income tax, more besides. All of it's going to
and
cross
there simply aren't enough. We discussed this on the show many times. There aren't enough very rich people over there to cover all those costs.
Well, the top 10% of income taxpayers already pay like 38% of the entire income tax bill.
Yeah,
right?
and also an awful lot of people leaving. I know the most extraordinary number of people who are planning to leave the country.
Well, this is a problem. Once you get to the very top, the bit where the income gets exponential,
they just move to their other home.
Yeah,
that's all they do.
mobile.
But also, I mean, younger people who are just sort of starting out and going, but the quality of life I can have, places like Italy and Greece and Portugal, the deal they're offering in terms, often you don't pay any income tax for the first year, and there's a lot of competition out there. There really, really is. We've also got the problem. Wes Streeting should be spending his time dealing with doctor strike, shouldn't he? Really, we've got that big doctor strike. I always find it extraordinary. The last few strikes we've had by the NHS, doctors, that actually it's not front page news. We've actually gone a whole week of 5-day strikes and barely even touched the subject. People just carry on as they were. Everyone's had so many long waits for appointments, so many cancelled appointments. Yesterday we were told by the chief of the NHS, or the interim chief, you've got to basically carry on and don't cancel all these operations. Good luck with that. But actually, there is an element where we're just used to incompetence and long waits in the NHS. No one really notices anymore. Has it lost its power?
It's the boiling frog, isn't it? I mean, NHS not working is now very much the dogs bites man version of this story, but also every government just walks into the same trap, which is that if you look at the way, think about the big totemic trades union showdowns of the 1980s, right? Thatcher versus the miners, Murdoch versus the print workers, right? In both cases, those leaders were pushing for a fundamental change to how that sector operated that broke the power of the union, right? Unless you're going to do something like that for the NHS, and it would be possible, for example, if you made NHS trusts the legal employers of doctors and nurses, suddenly you could never have another national NHS strike ever again. But unless you're going to do something like that, you do just have to pay the Danegeld, because ultimately these doctors have enormous leverage that we've given them through the structure of the health service. Yeah,
absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to take your calls up next. We're also going to be talking to the independent former Labour MP Rosie Duffield about Starmer at war, but also BBC boss finally admitting that, we need to actually cover both sides of the trans debate. Maybe just not have every single programme fronted by a drag queen. Might be a good start, would it not? We're also going to be talking about what is going on with those Epstein files and emails as well. That's all coming up. This is Talk.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Henry Hell from Conservative Home is still with me as well. And you're on the phone line, 0344 499 1000, asking you in particular about the chaos and plotting in Downing Street. Let's go to Richard, who's on the line in Wakefield. Richard, what do you want to say?
Morning, Julia.
Morning.
As a retired fairly senior civil servant, one of the things I might advise the government to do is watch episodes of Westminster because I think that's the way they're performing at the minute.
I mean, genuinely, the people in Westminster look competent compared to this lot.
Well, they were. The more important point I'm slightly worried about is this general election business. In that, and here's where I said to my wife, you have to be careful how you phrase these things. I don't think Mr Farage is ready to take on the Muslim vote just yet either. And there's a dreadful...
What do you mean by taking on the Muslim vote?
Well, you remember the fracas about Aston Villa's football match? Well, following that, the MP who for Dewsbury Batley, Iqbal Mohammed, has issued a really splendid YouTube film saying that they want to take over Birmingham, a bit like Tower Hamlets, basically, and the whole of the West Midlands. And given an ethnic map of the country, I don't think Mr Farage is ready to take on the Muslim vote yet. I
mean, you could argue, even the likes of the Labour Party leadership and the likes of the Health Secretary Wes Streeting facing that particular. I mean, I would say call them laughably Gaza MPs, but that threat from sort of a combined sort of Corbynista left and Muslim community leaders basically going, we're going to set our own agenda. That is a factor, and it makes people very squeamish. People all get very uncomfortable about it. That is now a huge factor in our politics.
Great. It's just a fact that I said to my wife, it's difficult ringing up because you sound like a terrible racist trying to explain the point you're making. Yeah. I'm not a racist. I'm just concerned I want to be ruled by the British. I'm not. Well,
also it's the idea that someone from any particular religion has to have a different, political agenda. If you live in Britain, if you're born here, you've come to live here, you should, want to be ruled by, your fellow Britons of whatever colour or religion, or I mean, there shouldn't be any difference. I don't like the idea of anyone talking about a black community, a Muslim community. There isn't a white community. I think everyone should be treated as individuals, but that's not how a lot of this politics works.
Correct. I'm not far right. I'm just far from the happy at the moment.
No, I don't think anyone listening thought you were, mate. I don't think it is a clear, open factor in our country now, and it is something that we have our betters have imposed on the country, and that is a reality, no doubt at all. Let's get to some of your texts and your tweets coming in. Jan says this Labour government doesn't represent true Labour and their historic values. They all need to go before our country is completely destroyed. Peter says, I'm still of the belief it's not possible for a government to be this incompetent. It must be planned. There will be a plan for when Starmer is replaced. It's still within the plan. Oh, Peter, I love your optimism, mate. Claire says, get rid of the whole government. They've proved they're not up to the job after 15 months. They can't keep blaming the Tories for their relentless cock-ups. Rick says every politician that has not publicly disavowed the World Economic Forum should be removed from office. Well, that's pretty much everybody. Patrick says, simple, the whole government. Deep clean, hard drive clean up, power wash the moss off. And Al says, everyone associated with Keir Starmer is tainted by his policy decisions and scandals, starting with the handouts from Lord Ali. He isn't a leader who's showing who is in command. The chaos we're seeing is because of his weak leadership. How many cabinet ministers or MPs think he's fit for purpose but are allowing him to carry on? Labour isn't fit for working class people anymore. And Sam says the rot's already set in. They all need removing. Wonderful vote of confidence from the audience there for Keir Starmer. I can't imagine our audience is his target voters, though, Henry.
No, but I mean, it is simply a fact that he is now the least popular Prime Minister on record.
It's quite something, that.
Right. I mean, it's in a year and a bit after the election. Labour's now polling at around 20%. Yeah. At one point there was a poll the other day which showed the Conservatives in second place, and it was just like, you know.
How bad are you?
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
I know.
Because the Conservatives haven't done well, but Labour have nonetheless fallen below them and
that
reform.
tells you everything,
right.
doesn't it? 11:33 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to someone who knows full well what Keir Starmer is really like. She is the former Labour MP, now an independent MP, Rosie Duff. Get her thoughts not just on Keir Starmer and that girls, but also what's been going on at the BBC, as she's been a great campaigner for women's and girls' rights in the face of that threat from trans rights. A BBC News boss actually admitting for the first time they haven't got their trans coverage right. So are things going to change? We'll find out next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to show. 11:36 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest. She's a former Labour MP, He's now sitting as an independent MP, Rosie Duffield. A very good morning to you, Rosie.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, a couple of big stories I want to get your thoughts on. In particular, we'll start with the chaos and plotting in number 10 Downing Street that we've seen. Now, bearing in mind that it was just over a year ago that you resigned the Labour whip, you decided to sit as an independent, and in your resignation letter, you talked about Keir Starmer's cruel and unnecessary policies, sleaze, nepotism, apparent avarice and hypocrisy over his acceptance of all those gifts, the freebie football tickets and the Lord Ali suits and glasses. So let's establish you're not Keir Starmer's biggest fan.
No.
What do you make of the plots and allegations that have emerged over the last couple of days?
I mean, look, the truth is I can say what my Labour colleagues can't say, and we've never been madly in love with Keir or his leadership. And I think the plan initially was to kind of get over the sort of Boris Johnson, success, and to just have a candidate that wasn't a leader that wasn't Jeremy Corbyn, because he'd done so badly on the doorsteps. And then we were going to find out when an election would be and see what we were going to do. I don't think anyone really imagined Keir as the next Prime Minister, if I'm honest. If you look how terribly badly we did as a party in the Hartlepool by-election, there was absolute outrage about how badly we did compared to the government, who weren't that popular at the time, and people have been talking about getting rid of him since then. Obviously then we had this huge election success, but nobody that I know, none of the older MPs and veteran MPs, ever imagined he would go 5 years after an election. I'm just being absolutely honest.
No, that's true. But it was fascinating, though. In July 24, after the election, the usual pundits were saying, the same ones who said that Boris Johnson in 2019 was going to last 10 years, the same ones who said that Labour Party were over, they were saying he's going to be in office for 10 years. Now it looks like he'll struggle to hit 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, no Prime Minister can survive the last terrible May election results, that one in Caerphilly, all of the scandals, all of the U-turns, all of the internal squabbles, and then May's the local elections, which are set to be dire. So there's no way that he can survive all of those things.
Well, there's now talk whether he can even survive the budget, which is what we think that this plotting has been about, and there's talk about an imminent threat from whether it's Wes Streeting or someone else. But here's the thing. Is there anybody else who is more competent and more appealing to the public, who also would get elected by the Labour Party membership? Because Wes Streeting comes across to an awful lot of people in the mainstream. It's like, he seems pretty sensible. I'm very angry. I'm not happy about his pro-Palestinian anti-Israel stance, but and I don't think he's done, we'll come on to the trans thing an issue, but I don't think he's done well on that front, having made a promising start. So, but he hasn't got a chance in hell of getting elected on Labour Party membership because he's seen as Blairite. And let's face it, they're all still Corbynistas.
True. And I think there are two questions. Is this just a Prime Minister for now? Because as one of my very senior colleagues said to me, before July had even ended in 2024, this is the last Labour government for a generation. So are we just limping to the next general election, and it looks poll-wise as though that's what the party will be doing? Or are we really hoping for someone who can try and rebuild and re-establish this party and win the next election? And those are possibly two very different candidates.
What about the prospect of, if there were a leadership election, and the new leader was elected, whether it was, God forbid, Ed Miliband or someone else, that actually anything would really change enough? Because at the end of the day, if you've got, and Henry Hill's, he's deputy editor of Conservative Home, but he's had to watch the Conservatives basically, drive themselves into the ground. Nothing's going to change in terms of, the economic realities of where we are. Nothing's going to change when it comes to Labour backbenchers being unwilling to vote for any welfare reform. And I know one of the things you resigned about was you didn't want some of that welfare reform. I think you are wrong on that. But nothing's going to change. The numbers ain't going to change other than going more wrong.
No, you're right. I mean, I don't think there's anything now, if I'm absolutely honest, and I can be, that Labour can do to save themselves. I think there's been so much economic distrust and all these U-turns. What are Labour for? And one of the reasons I was a Labour MP and not a Conservative MP is because we've always argued against that two-child limit and those kinds of austerity measures. If I'd wanted those, I'd have been a Conservative, or even nowadays possibly a Reform MP. But I'm not. I was a Labour MP. And when you vote Labour and you are a Labour MP, you want Labour to actually be Labour. And at the moment, I'm not sure anyone knows what they're for. They're trying to sort of chase reform because they've had a bit of an eye on the polls, but that never works. Reform or reform, So Labour have got to provide an alternative, or the Greens are going to eat up the left vote.
But what is that alternative when people have got sky-high taxes, welfare spending is ballooning, threatening to get even worse, the debt is ballooning, the cost of the debt is ballooning, and again, threatening to get even worse? What is the Labour alternative? Because the only alternative, if anyone can do maths, is you've got to cut spending.
Yeah, true. I mean, it looks as though we don't have any choices at the moment. If you're going to have to do that, it looks like Rachel Reeves is going to have to do that, at least frame it in a way that the Labour Party will understand and accept. Make it with a view to stopping some of these cuts that people can't stand in a while. Explain why you're doing that. They haven't done that at all. They've just come in and to cut the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, it was insane.
Straight away. I mean, why do that? So I think she alienated everyone. I think possibly that the winter fuel allowance was the first and last nail in their coffin, if I'm
Absolutely.
honest.
But on the two-child benefit cap, again, you resigned over that. I did think the £5 billion in welfare cuts, it wasn't even going to cut the budget. It was going to make it not grow at quite the same amount. So it wasn't even
That's
a proper
true.
cut. And cutting the amount that people who are disabled get is not what we should be doing. We should be cutting the number of people who are eligible, particularly for minor ailments, minor anxiety and depression, to not work. And we've seen the idea that we have, a million more people in the last year who were able to claim these benefits, universal credit for benefits, and never actually be required to even look for work because of their various largely mental health problems. It frankly is a joke, and it's a joke on the British taxpayer. Now, every Labour MP claiming to be, used to be the party of the working class, should absolutely be supporting getting those people off welfare and into work, and making sure that their working class voters don't have to pay tax to have someone living next door swinging the lead. But also on the two-child benefit cap, there are Labour voters who are going, I can't afford to have one kid, two kids, three kids, because I'm paying so much tax to support other people who are on welfare. If you want to have 3, 4, 5, 6 kids, get a job to pay for them, would be what they would say. Same as me.
Absolutely.
That's not a right-wing view. So why would you want to scrap the two-child benefit cap?
No, I agree with that. And I think, look, we need to drill down a bit more into that. I mean, people claiming that they've got anxiety for several years, without a proper mental health service that's funded throughout the country, those people can't get help, can't get themselves back to work. They're crippled by some of the things that were caused by lockdown, young people not even back into education yet, this group called NEET. I think we need to look at all of these things instead of just papering over them. And you're right, the two-child limit is a really contested thing. The thing I hate about it the most was what was called the rape clause. So if you are attacked or raped and have a third child, you've got to declare that. You've got to absolutely humiliate and embarrass yourself, tell a load of strangers that that's what's happened to you, and your child will then be stigmatised. So I think there are elements of that are dire.
I'm sorry, I don't think that's the excuse for spending billions more pounds of taxpayers' money because someone in a document has to say, I didn't actually want to have this child. I mean, maybe we should get those women out of a situation where they're being raped. Maybe they should have abortions. They might not for religious reasons. That's not that. Yeah. I mean, I honestly, I think that's a cop-out, to be honest with you, Rosie.
No, fair enough, but that is why I was a Labour MP. We believe in welfare. The Tories and Reform.
You shouldn't believe in welfare. You should believe in a safety net, not welfare.
I think there's something in between there, isn't there? I mean, I think we'd find a way of agreeing.
I believe in from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That's Karl Marx, I believe. But that's fundamental.
Right.
I think that a Labour MP, as you were, a Labour Party, should be representing working people and not welfare.
I absolutely agree, but there are some families that do work two or three jobs and still can't afford to live. And look at the fact that wages are really low.
This is again a nonsense. You're talking about dad working 2 days a week and there's a mum working a few hours somewhere. So you're not talking about two parents working full time like lots of other families do, and they're not being able to. When we talk about the working poor on welfare, they are not parents working full time. End of.
I do know people that do that, and I worked in a school in a really deprived bit of Canterbury, because believe it or not, there are deprived bits of Canterbury, and there were parents working incredibly hard, and they themselves were peed off when they saw what they thought were 12 child families getting benefits. So we need to get it right, and I think just scrapping it for more than 2 children isn't. It's a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
But none of those children had to be born since that 2 years after the policy was announced. People had to. You've got a choice. There are millions of parents making a choice every single day not to have another child because they can't afford it, because they're paying so much tax, because they're paying for people who are not making the right choices. Let me ask you about the BBC there, because you've been a fantastic campaigner for women's rights, girls' rights, not anti-trans, just pro-women's rights and safety. What did you make of the BBC boss who, this blew my mind. He's the corporation's director of news content, Richard Burgess. Yesterday he told journalists in an all-staff call that they must cover the gender debate impartially, and this is going to blow your mind, consider the views of both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us are really surprised, are we, that this has been going on? You know, when I did get onto Women's Hour, they sort of were trying to get me on for ages, and I knew it would be very, very hostile. And it was at the peak of all of this, sort of 2021-ish, I think.
I'm surprised they even invited you on.
Oh, Emma Barnett was, you know, a bit of an attack dog, but she's very good at her job. And obviously the sort of lens that the BBC looked at this is all through trans rights, not women's rights. And I think that's the culture that needs to change.
Well, absolutely. And again, I mean, if in doubt, put a drag queen on. I mean, that seems to be the answer. But do you think things are changing? Because we've had that ruling from the Supreme Court, April. We've still got, I mean, you know, men who claim they're women or dress up as women being allowed to go into the women's toilets in Parliament, for goodness sake. We've still got men being held behind bars in women's prisons. This is still going. We've still got nurses in NHS hospitals at tribunals saying, I don't want a doctor who claims he's a woman to be standing watching me in my bra and knickers when I get changed. It's still happening. Nothing's changed, has it? I mean, Piers Morgan's written a book saying woke is dead. Well, yeah, good luck with that.
But that's where we go back to working women, because women in Parliament are very privileged, and, you know, people like us can talk about trans rights and be all inclusive and lovely, but when you are a nurse or a teaching assistant or someone who needs to change for work, you do need that dignity and privacy. And people like us, our job is to make sure that you do get that through the law. You mentioned women in prisons. My colleague Rebecca Paul raised that in Prime Minister's questions, and Downsview is a prison in her constituency. We've both been told in the chamber often that there are no men in women's prisons, but we know that there are. She's been there, she's seen them, she knows those staff. So that is something that hasn't quite filtered through yet. So we have these sort of middle class commentators who are all about inclusion, and the reality filters right the way down to women in prisons and women in working class jobs.
Absolutely. Rosie Duffield, so good to talk to you, independent former Labour MP Rosie Duffield. There. Quick response from Henry Hill.
I mean, on the problem with the prisons, of course, is that we've got no spaces. So where are you going to move these handful of prisoners to?
To men's prisons.
Well, yeah, but exactly. But there's no. But you need to release some people. That's the prisons are a hideous mess. The thing that struck me about the BBC is that it's a lot of the problem is actually down to a restructure they did. There's now specialist desks. So previously every show would have a reporter who just covers stuff, and understandably your trans desk gets full of people with a view on that issue.
Who have an obsession with that.
Exactly, and that I think is the problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, again, you know, let's face it, like the climate change correspondents, whoa, yeah, you are absolutely crazy to actually say this is all a load of nonsense because you're off jetting away to Brazil for a conference, having a great time. Shh, keep strum, keep up the lifestyle. 11:49 is the time. I'm going to take a break. Then we're going to find out what on earth have we actually learnt new from those Epstein files released last night. This is Talk.
most sophisticated counter-terrorism systems and operations.
We don't really.
You're
We've got a
telling me
counter-terrorism review. What?
We can't deal with one lady. We can't monitor and make sure that she's doesn't commit.
Ivan, I'm allowed to say this to you, mate. You're in Dubai. I'm not saying who you represent or how you make your money. I live in the United Kingdom. Our Justice Secretary had to admit yesterday that 91 people have actually escaped from prison in the last 12 months. I haven't got any faith in any systems.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:53 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to my next guest, Adam Coleman. He's a columnist at the New York Post. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It'll be very early for you indeed. But I want to talk to you about these Epstein emails. This big tranche of emails. First of all, 3 emails that sort of implicated Donald Trump. Initially, big denials from the White House press secretary. And then overnight, massive big tranche of documents and files being released from those Epstein files. First of all, is this all the Epstein files? And secondly, have we actually learned anything new?
So I'm trying to be as objective as possible when looking at this. One, I could recognize politically anytime Donald Trump's name pops up next to Epstein, for any reason, it doesn't look good for him. So I can acknowledge that. Yeah. But just looking at the context of the emails, I don't know what most of this means. I don't know what they're implying. Much of it is in shorthand. It's not very detailed. It's implying stuff that we don't know of. So there's like missing context.
Yeah. So you'd have to put a whole string of emails together somehow to work out what it was all about. Right.
So for example, everyone's clinging on to Trump knew about the girls, but what exactly does that mean? Did Trump think that these girls were prostitutes of legal age, or did Trump know that they were underage? We don't know. What does that mean, knew about the girls? So like there are different things that we are either implying ourselves because we have our certain biases about them, or what, but there's just missing information here.
And also the avalanche of information makes it difficult to sift through, doesn't it? But there's initial claims that, that he had actually spent hours at Epstein's home with, and it was a redacted name of the girl. That was later revealed as being Virginia Giuffre, of course, the whistleblower on an awful lot of this, who sadly now has taken her own life. But her memoirs have caused a storm, and we've led to Prince Andrew no longer a prince or a duke as a result of those revelations. But she has written a public statement in the past, which has not seen retracted, and certainly wasn't retracted in her memoirs published posthumously, where she didn't accuse Donald Trump of anything, and basically said he'd always behaved with propriety towards her. So you've got to sort of wonder, how reasonable those claims are.
Yeah, exactly. Even in one of the emails where he claims he was never banned from Mar-a-Lago, yet even the New York Times and all these other publications verify and corroborate the story that he was banned from Mar-a-Lago. It was never seen in Mar-a-Lago ever since. Yeah. So the other part is Jeffrey Epstein lying in any of these emails? Because if we're reading it,
pedophile lying? No.
I know, shock, right? So we're presuming he is telling the truth throughout his exchanges with these different people.
Yeah, that's an important point, isn't it? I mean, one thing that it is noticeable is the Epstein email claiming that the photo of Prince Andrew, as he was then, with Virginia Giuffre was real. Now, that was, what kind of sparked a lot of the first allegations when Virginia Giuffre said she'd had sex as a 17-year-old, slave trafficked by Epstein and by Ghislaine Maxwell, that she'd been basically forced to have sex with Prince Andrew. He's always denied that. He's even denied meeting her. He said he's always claimed that he thinks that photograph is doctored. But I mean, I don't think anyone really thought that wasn't a real photograph, did they?
No, not at all. Like, there's nothing about it that looked doctored. And even when he is trying to explain away, he sounds like a guilty person. So no one actually believed that.
But definitely not guilty. And he just paid £12 million to a woman who he'd never met, the way, I say, a lot of us will have obviously done over the years. Where does this go, though? Because there's no doubt at all, look, Donald Trump, who normally you can't shut him up at any press conference, he's announcing, this bill, to end the longest US government shutdown in modern history. And then he doesn't take any questions. Normally, you're literally going, seriously, Donald, that's enough now. He just refused to take any questions from the waiting media. That's a bit of a giveaway that he knows this is trouble for him.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, politically, this doesn't look good. And to be fair, Trump has done less press in this administration, far less press this administration than previous. He's done press when it is obvious about what he's about to do, what he's about to say, and it makes him look good. So he's been very clear on that. He's not streaming into other territory.
Yeah.
But I can't help but notice the timing of all this. When the Democrats have been holding out for all this time for the shutdown to get the thing that they want, and magically these emails hit the press.
Ta-da.
So, I don't know. And especially, these are emails that have been around apparently in Democrat circles, or at least in the federal government for quite some time.
Yeah.
The Biden administration, the FBI had access to all this, and just magically, when they needed it, it was there.
They suddenly appeared. And again, at the end of the day, we all talk about people playing politics with revelations about little, young girls' lives, young trafficked women's lives. Adam Coleman, columnist at the New York Post, thank you very much indeed for that. Henry Hill, bring you in. Again, we don't seem to have learned anything new. I expected to wake up this morning to some sort of massive big revelation about who'd been on Epstein's, paedophile island, but we haven't got anything yet.
No, I mean, there's a vast amount of documentation here, and it will take ages to get through. We might get them yet, but not so far.
I mean, we'll bring it to you first as soon as we get any, but I mean, the reality of this is playing politics, and everyone knows any link with Jeffrey Epstein is very damaging. But there's a lot of plague on all your houses for the voters, isn't there? That a load of rich, very powerful men spend an awful lot of time with a man who, if you had any eyes and ears, you knew that he was basically trafficking young women, and you just basically turned a blind eye to it at best and took part at worst. No doubt we'll find out more as the days, the weeks, the months and the years can't pass. Up next, we're going to take a quick break, get the news, and then we're going to be talking to Reform Deputy Leader Richard Tice. Stay tuned.
Across the UK. On on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Don't forget, if you've missed anything of the show, do go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to talk more about the chaos at number 10. Also going to be talking about Wes Streeting, accusing the British Medical Association of acting like a cartel over their pay demands, and the former head of Ofsted accusing Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, of abandoning the humanities to appease unions. Baroness Spillman, who will speak to you later in the show, has warned the Education Secretary's plan to scrap the English Baccalaureate risks undermining take-up in foreign languages, humanities, like history, stuff that it'd be really nice if our kids knew about, wouldn't it? Perhaps if they were taught proper history, that would also help as well. We're going to be talking about all of that and plenty more besides. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the big stories we are talking about, including, in particular, the chaos and plotting at number 10. Is the answer to replace the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney? He's had the finger pointed at him. Is it to replace the Prime Minister? If so, who do you think should replace him as leader? Who could be either A, vaguely more competent, or B, able to get elected with a lefty Labour Party membership? Or should this replace the whole government? Do we need an election? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate altogether now. Text costs £1. Standard network rate charge. 8 message, or whatever it is. I said it all together and I got it wrong. I say it in my head when I go to sleep. Henry Hill, I'm delighted to say, is joining me throughout the show, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Absolute
pleasure to have you here. So much to talk about. We're going to be talking to the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, in just a couple of moments. But in terms of the talk of an early election, if there was a leadership change, should there be an election? Bearing in mind, Keir Starmer, by the way, is currently... He's in Wales. He's not abroad. Never hear Keir is actually here. He's in Anglesey in North Wales. After the government has confirmed that Anglesey is going to host the UK's first small modular nuclear reactors. I mean, literally the one good thing you could say about this government, they're actually going to build some nuclear reactors. Well, they say they're going to. So we'll see about that. But I mean, does anyone at the Labour Party, or indeed the Conservative Party, and we'll put to Richard Tice, do the Reform Party, do they actually want an early election?
I mean, I can't imagine the Conservative strategy has been basically assuming the general election will be 4 years away and therefore slow peddling everything. I don't think they've selected any of their candidates. That would all have to be scrambled. Obviously the Labour Party doesn't. We were discussing earlier, hundreds of Labour MPs would lose their seats. There's lots of them on very narrow majorities. But the crucial thing to remember is that the Fixed Term Parliaments Act is gone.
Yeah.
They do not need to vote for it. So Keir Starmer can ask the King to dissolve Parliament.
You make a very good point. Yes, I said earlier, would MPs vote for it? But yeah,
they don't have to. Yeah. And so that is the ultimate sort of reserve card that the Prime Minister has. His allies are trying to say
the Prime Minister has the right to commit suicide at any time, metaphorically.
The power of dissolution is a powerful card in the Prime Minister's arsenal. Now his allies are making
that's basically, I'll take you all down with me.
I mean, which if you're on the boat and you think he means it, that could be dissuasive. I mean, his allies are trying to say that if he goes, the new leader would have to have a general election. As you've said, that is not the case constitutionally, but nonetheless, does anyone want an early general election? Does anyone want one?
Well, there's a few weirdos at the BBC and Sky. They'd love it. I've got to be honest.
Can you imagine that?
Well, we'll put that, among other questions, to our next guest. Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, joins us right now. Good afternoon to you, Richard.
Very good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much for this. Well, I'll come on to an election in just a moment, but let's talk about the chaos in number 10, because we've got accusations of plotting and demands for the sacking or the resignation of Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Did the Prime Minister know or not know? Have his aides gone rogue, or has he been directing them to plot against the likes of the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, and others? He had to apologise, the Prime Minister, to Wes Streeting last night over those briefings about a leadership plot. No doubt at all the Prime Minister is weaker now rather than stronger after this. What do you think is going on, and should any heads roll, and if so, whose?
Well, I can tell you that actually this has been building and bubbling for at least 9 days. I was aware at the beginning of last week of not one but 4 separate leadership teams for 4 separate cabinet ministers.
Name them. Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, Ed Miliband. Who else?
I'm going to leave that to your expertise, Julia. But,
David Lammy.
I'm going to leave that to your expertise, but I can tell you that this has been building. This is not just a sort of a one-day element of madness from someone in the number 10 bunker, but it is a bunker. They are completely hunkered down, and they know that this is, at some point, this is coming. And we're heading towards a budget in a couple of weeks' time, which is very, very likely to be the last budget by this Chancellor and the last budget that's enjoyed by this Prime Minister.
Yeah.
That's my prediction. Change is coming in this Labour government over the next 6 to 12 months, big time.
Well, that's a lot of people are saying, you know, oh, Donald, I mean, no question at all, Keir Starmer, he's got that big majority, he'll last 10 years. I remember thinking, yeah, right. I'd always said Labour are going to get elected, but they'll last one term because I know how bad they're going to be. And now people are talking about he'll be lucky to survive next summer or possibly by Christmas. As you mentioned, the budget is the big tripwire, and the proof is going to certainly be in the local elections, the Scottish and Welsh elections, where I know Reform has been making a play. Lots of talk, though. If there were a new leader, there'd have to be a general election. Now, constitutionally, we've just been discussing there doesn't have to be, but bearing in mind that Keir Starmer is our shadow Brexit secretary in the 2019 election, he was the one who said we needed to have a second referendum because people didn't know what they were voting for in 2016 when they voted for Brexit. So you could argue, you know, they didn't know they were voting for an Ed Miliband or a Wes Streeting or a Shabana Mahmood premiership, so we'd have to get a general election. Are you ready for a general election as early as next year?
But there's not going to be an election next year. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. But if there's some financial drama over the next couple of years, then sort of after the second half of 2027, thereafter anything could happen, and we would be ready for that time frame.
Why is it going to happen in 2077 but not 2026?
As I say, if there's a financial drama...
OK, so why wouldn't that financial drama happen after the budget or in January?
The point is, we're heading towards a drama, but you never quite know when it's going to be. I'm just saying that's a more likely time frame. And we've got GDP figures out this morning showing effectively no growth whatsoever in the last 3 months, complete flatlining. And given the amount of money that's being poured into the public sector, the fact that we borrowed 100 billion quid in the first 6 months of this year, essentially the private sector is in recession. Jobs are being slaughtered all over the country. And the bond markets at some point are going to say, hang on, you're borrowing all this money, you're not increasing your value. In fact, the value's going down. This can't carry on. And so there has to be a day of reckoning, a day of significant change where the government of the day says we've got to stop wasting public sector spending all over the place on vast pay rises with no productivity requirements, gold-plated defined benefit pension schemes that are a huge liability for the country. And we've got to get back to a sensible situation where actually it pays to go to work, and it pays to take some risk by being an entrepreneur and a small business owner. Yeah, and that's what we've been highlighting in the last couple of weeks.
And that's something that a lot of people would agree with. I think a lot of people who don't even vote to reform. Can I ask you, just sticking on the leadership, just the last question, is there another Labour leader that you would prefer to be battling against at the next general election other than Keir Starmer? Would it be better or worse for you if it was Wes Streeting or Shabana Mahmood or David Lammy or Ed Miliband?
Oh, I think Keir Starmer's doing a splendid job for reform. He really is being most helpful. We're most grateful. I think Ed Miliband would also be most helpful to reform with his eco-zealotry and his obsession with net stupid zero. Again, I think that would also help reform and people realise the madness of their plan. So, yeah, this is all to play for. We're working hard. We're looking forward to the May elections. 5,500 candidates, Julia. It's an absolutely massive one, and there's a lot to be done. But we're pushing on. I will, in fairness, credit where credit's due, Julia. There's some good news by the government today. They've announced they're going to abolish the Police and Crime Commission.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that.
Yeah, give that responsibility to elected mayors. I think that actually is a sensible move. Finally, there's something where we can go.
And you approve of that move on cost basis or accountability basis? On what basis?
On accountability basis, it makes it easier for voters to know that actually the mayor, lots of people are sort of questioning, why do we need a mayor? Why do we need a police and crime commissioner? Well, if you merge the two, then it's clearer the accountability and the responsibility. And chief constables do need to be held to account. They can't just essentially have no accountability. And so I think this is a sensible measure. Look, it's an experiment that's been tried for the last, whatever it is, decade or so. And it hasn't worked. So,
well, also very few people. I think it's under 20% of people in local elections even vote for these people. And they've not really held chief constables to account. If they had, we wouldn't have people being arrested for non-crime hate incidents and hurty tweets, and we might have some shoplifters arrested. Keir Starmer's currently, well, he's in Anglesey in North Wales. The government has confirmed that Anglesey is going to get the UK's first small modular nuclear reactor. I think Liz Kendall is speaking right now. Ed Miliband's been speaking. They all want to be in on it. I mean, this is a policy you would also support, is it not?
It is, and we've been very proud.
You're going to be a Labour voter at this rate, Richard.
Well, no, but hear me out. The issue is, why is it going to take 10 years to build them? Actually, they could be built much faster. That's the key thing. And the civil service and this government are being far, far too slow in approving these plans and getting on with it. It's dither and delay all the way along. Look, I think all parties are pro the SMRs. It's clearly good for Britain that these are primarily British Rolls-Royce SMRs. There are small modular reactors. Yeah. There are other ones that are out there as well. But look, it's good for Britain. It's good for energy security. But once again, they're just taking far too long over it. And a reform government would get on with it and would get these things built faster, sooner, using, very importantly, British steel. Absolutely vital. I was truly shocked to hear just yesterday of a warship recently delivered to the Royal Navy that had precisely 0% of British manufactured steel. I mean, you can't make some of this stupidity up. But that, of course, was instructed by the Tories.
OK. Let's also talk about the doctors' strike. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, when he's not fending off accusations of a leadership plot, has now accused the Doctors' Union, BMA, of behaving like a cartel. Because they are the only doctors' union holding everyone to basically over a barrel for a bigger pay rise. They've had a 29% pay rise, far more than any other public sector worker, probably most in private sector as well. Doctors still claim they are still earning far less than they did before austerity hit under the Tories. What would you do to deal with doctor strikes if you were, I don't know, presumably Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, the simple thing is that the government did not impose any form of performance pay. They didn't introduce any productivity requirements. So, surprise, surprise, the unions have just taken the mickey and they've come straight back round the table for more. It's what we see with socialism, hard left socialism. This happens time and time again. And everybody has to perform, everybody has to deliver and be held to account. And I think what we're seeing is, and there is a small cartel of disruptive union leaders at the BMA. I mean, most doctors and most people on the front line of healthcare actually despair at the BMA. It is a rogue organisation, and it is sort of completely negative towards improving healthcare. It's just that they just want to disrupt and be difficult, and that's incredibly unhelpful to the health of our nation.
Can I ask, would you make any changes to doctors' working practices? We see a huge number of doctors now as GPs working part-time, partly because their GPs got a pay rise that meant that they could pay all their mortgages, pay their costs working 3 days a week, not 5 days a week, and not even weekends anymore. Many doctors working in the NHS who, we've subsidised their, even though they've paid tuition fees for those years of training, but we've subsidised their training to the tune of the best part of £250,000 each of them, are also choosing to work part-time once qualified. Would you make a requirement that doctors, given the overstretched services, given the lack of resources, given the long waiting list, that actually if you want to work for the NHS, but if you want to get trained here, be subsidised, you've got to work for the NHS, and when you work for the NHS for a period of time, you have to work full-time?
Well, the first thing is healthcare should still be free at the point of delivery. We make that absolutely clear. But of course, it can, all the delivery of all healthcare can be improved, whether it's doctors' working practices, the mismanagement of whether it's GP surgeries, whether it's the way the pharmacies are currently operating, whether it's the way that hospitals and diagnostic centres are being run. All the frontline healthcare staff tell me that there's not a shortage of money. It's just the way that it's wasted and spent and mismanaged. That's the key thing that we've got to change, and that requires some changes in processes and practices across the board.
And surely also in personnel.
Well, yeah, in terms of the management, you've got to change the quality of management, reduce the unnecessary tiers of bureaucracy, which is all over the place. Have I got a Bible of answers here today, Julia? No. Will we have by the time of the next election? Pretty much yes.
But not if it's in 2026. Let me ask you also about the Employment Rights Bill, the Workers' Rights Bill. This was being very much pushed by the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. But yet more challenges coming within the House of Lords, actually, talking about how this Workers' Rights Bill will open up businesses to years of litigation from employers who want to work from home. Basically, the bill tells employers, I mean, basically, the moment someone's hired, they've got all the workers' rights normally you require after 1 or 2 years. But it's also going to tell employers they can only turn down requests to work remotely if they can show it's not a reasonable request, which is going to be very much a personal judgment call. What would you do in terms of those rights if you were in charge?
This whole bill is a disaster. I'm hearing from businesses, they're just stopping recruitment. And tragically, do you know who they're most stopping recruitment for, Julia? Young people. Yep. 18 to 21-year-olds, and it's a disaster. And tens and tens of thousands of youngsters are missing out now, as we speak, on their first jobs because of this. And you've got to scrap the whole Employment Rights Bill, lock, stock, and barrel. Frankly, you've got to scrap most of what this government's done since day one, except what we talked about earlier. And yeah, it's a catastrophe. It's an extra cost on businesses. Many of whom are now, bizarrely sort of saying, well, I'd rather employ a 65-year-old than an 18-year-old. This is just utterly ludicrous.
Would you, in terms of working practices in government, would it be reform policy that if you work in Whitehall, you need to be at a desk at 9 a.m. in Whitehall?
There's no question that being in the office delivers higher productivity. There are moments, of course, where you've got to read a really boring report, or you've got to write a report.
Or write a boring report.
Yeah, and you're better to do that with a cold towel over your head and a nice glass of something at home, stuck in a bed. That's fine. We all get that. But basically, when you're sort of sharing knowledge, sharing best practice, coming up with great new ideas, that's best done in and around the office.
Okay.
And I think we all know that.
Finally, I just want to ask you about BBC. We're told they are preparing to issue an apology to Donald Trump for that, apparently just a mistake. Not politically motivated, not institutionally biased at all, but just a mistake in splicing together two parts of a speech 54 minutes apart to make it look like Donald Trump had basically urged violence at the head of the January the 6th riots. Now, there's going to be an apology, we expect. There's probably also likely to be a payoff, not $1 billion, as it was a lawsuit, but a payoff of some sort. Should any of taxpayers' money, which is what the licence fee is, should that be given to Donald Trump?
Well, the key thing is that if the BBC is fulsome and totally contrite in its apology and explains how this could never ever happen again, then I would expect that that would be sufficient. I mean, they might make some form of offer of a donation to a charity or something. Those are normally the ways through when this sort of thing happens.
But that's our money.
Yes, but here's the point about accountability. That means we can then hold the BBC to account for its catastrophic failures, not only over the sort of interference with an overseas election, but also with its pro-Hamas stance, also with its ludicrous pro-trans stance, also with its ludicrous pro-net zero stance, which, by the way, they've announced a climate change review, which I'm insisting is an independent review, given that I was a victim of some of their bias when I was on Question Time a few months back. And so the list goes on, and change is coming and accountability is coming. And if this costs the BBC something, well, all the more reason to demand major changes. And 2 people resigning is not enough. A wholesale change and clear out is required. And Nigel talked the other day that actually part of that wholesale rethink is a rethink of the way the BBC is funded in the medium term.
We shall look at that again, I'm sure. Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you so much for joining us. Henry Hill, listening to all of that, Conservative Home, Conservative Reform taking a lot of your voters, or rather difficult. I want to come back just to the issue on workers' rights, employers' rights. There's no doubt at all that is really, really worrying for an awful lot of employers, but also interesting for employees as well, because what we've seen, you can have employment rights, but you may not have employment.
I mean, essentially, yes, it's great if you've already got a job because it makes you essentially easy to get work from home, harder to sack. But
I don't think that is great for people, because that means all the people you work with who aren't any good, they can't get rid of them either.
I mean, okay, they're actually a very
I would always
good
rather
point.
work somewhere where you actually you were accountable.
Yeah, but the usual example is rent controls. If you're in a rent-controlled apartment, absolutely wonderful. No one else can get an apartment, and it's the same here. It's going to freeze up hiring. It's going to make we've got 5% unemployment, and I do think that on things like working from home, there is a tension between young people do benefit from being in an office. They build those workplace connections and so 100%. On, and there was a hugely imbalanced impact on who gets hurt or benefits from working from home, but also just on economic growth. This is a government that says we are going hell for leather on economic growth, and it is actually an uncontroversial thing in economics, really, that there's sort of a slider that you can have sort of less regulation and a freer market and more growth and then more inequality, and then ideally you can use the tax revenue and spend that. But this is an anti-growth measure. Yeah, it's going to make the economy even worse.
Plus, we've got more inequality, so some people get richer. That doesn't make those other people poorer.
Well, indeed. I mean, I've
never understood that.
This is relative poverty.
Yeah.
Every time you hear an organisation...
Other people get better off by working harder and getting paid more for being more productive, and then we're supposed to go, oh, isn't it terrible the people who are not doing that are getting relatively poorer?
I mean, genuinely, the number of times I've been debating with people like, oh, did you know that X number of people have fallen into relative something poverty? And I'm like, I have no interest in a definition of poverty where you can lift someone out of poverty. You can lift one person out of poverty by confiscating a bunch of money from a second person and setting it on fire.
Not even giving it to them.
No, literally just getting rid of it.
Relative poverty is having under 60% of the income of the median earner in the country.
It is a pure equality measure. It is nothing to do with how well off somebody is in absolute terms.
No, absolutely, it's madness, isn't it? I mean, again, also, if everyone was a billionaire and some people were not billionaires, they would be in relative poverty on their gold thrones on their yachts.
Exactly.
12:24 is time. I'm going to get to your calls up next. Give us a call about anything you want to talk about, but in particular chaos at number 10. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
have the most sophisticated counter-terrorism systems and operations.
We don't really.
You're
We've got a
telling me
counter-terrorism review. What?
We can't deal with one lady. We can't monitor and make sure that she's doesn't commit.
Ivan, I'm allowed to say this to you, mate. You're in Dubai. I'm not saying who you represent or how you make your money. I live in the United Kingdom. Our Justice Secretary had to admit yesterday that 91 people have actually escaped from prison in the last 12 months. I haven't got any faith in any systems.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls coming in thick and fast. Largely about Keir Starmer and general elections. I don't know which you'd hate the prospect of both. Of which of those? Laura Jane is in Hampshire and wants to have her say. She's called up on 0344 499 1000. Laura Jane, good afternoon to you. What do you want to say?
Good afternoon, Julia. I don't think we want to get rid of Starmer because the prospect of who would come after is much more dangerous.
Yeah.
I think we want to keep him in there. He's welcome to get rid of Morgan McSweeney, but who is obviously a dangerous fella, but I don't know who's going to go in there instead.
Yeah.
I think this is a really worrying moment for those of us who haven't voted Labour.
Who would be your worst case scenario replacement for Keir Starmer?
Angela Rayner.
Oh, interesting. Why?
I think she's more left wing than left wing. I think she's very dangerous, and I also think revenge politics is what she's been brought up on.
Oh, that is so true. I think the thing is, I liked her personally. She's very good fun personally, but again, she's just totally caught up in, as you say, in that completely left wing. Isn't it interesting though how people talk about people on there, Ed Miliband or Angela Rayner, and they're often talked about but they're nice people, they're good people, they just might not be very competent. Whereas actually the politics they espouse is really dangerous and is really, really bad for particularly not just the wealthy people. They'll get taxed more, but they'll be fine. But actually, it hits the poorest people the most.
Yes. Can I just mention, I know you're not very pro-religion, but the Archbishop...
No, I'm pro-people's right to believe anything they want. I'm marching the streets for it,
Archbishop of Canterbury's latest idea to allow immigrants to convert to Christianity,
and then
it's not well reported because basically you can't just convert. You have to have instruction. Now, I'm speaking as a Roman Catholic, so I know that it is the same in the Church of England. You have to have instruction. So, you can't just baptize somebody like John the Baptist did in the Bible.
And lo and behold, you're now a Christian, yes.
Exactly. And during the process of instruction, you meet the family, etc. And this is just pie in the sky. And I'm afraid she's another appointment that I feel very strongly
I wonder how she got a job.
I wonder how
I think we all know, don't we? Laura Jane, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Matt, who is in Cheshire. Hi, Matt, what do you want to say?
Hi, good afternoon, Julia. It was about a couple of things. Keir Starmer in North Wales. One, he looked like he was dressed for his own funeral.
He's wearing, I don't know if he's wearing navy or black, but a dark shirt, dark suit, yeah.
He just really doesn't suit clothes or any.
He doesn't suit clothes. I'd rather he was wearing clothes than not, to be honest with you, Matt. No. Oh, God, I've got that image in my head now. No. What did you just do?
Sorry about that, Julia. Yeah, basically, for the first time in generations, he's now offering something to the people of North Wales because they're going to get torn apart by Plaid in South Wales and Reform in North Wales. Mm-hmm. And in terms of who they choose for the leader of the Labour Party, it doesn't even matter now at this point. They could magically design somebody in a 3D printer Farage walks uncontested into number 10.
You think so, no matter who it was? What about if they could magically come up with another sort of Blairite figure? I mean, the thing about Keir Starmer, he's kind of Blair Mark II, but actually Blair was really clever. He was a really good communicator.
People don't want these old forms of regurgitated politics anymore, Julia. They want new things like Trump, like Farage. They want people that speak their language.
Yeah.
These archaic sort of ideas should be buried forever.
Very interesting, Matt. Thank you very much indeed. Listening to that, Henry Hill of Conservative Home in the studio. I mean, I think that's right. Doesn't matter who he replaces, but also that, you know, you've got, if you've got an issue, people don't want what the mainstream parties are offering.
I mean, that's true, and also, but the public are also just, you know, I don't think any party has been honest with them about the real state of Britain's financial situation. Blair was undoubtedly very talented, but we keep hearing Labour people say, oh, you know, it's like New Labour without the charisma, or it's New Labour without the messaging. And it's New Labour without the money, right? For all of Blair's gifts, Blair came in 1997, strong economy, several years of economic growth, and taxes at historic lows, which allowed him to increase public spending, including by borrowing, for 10 years.
Yeah, I also think actually Margaret Thatcher gets away with an awful lot. You know, in terms of what she was able to do. Basically, they had North Sea oil money, and by the way, let's remember what Norway did. One of the reasons why Norway is so well off and they can spend on infrastructure, spend on everything, is they basically put loads of that money into a wealth fund. 4% of the world's wealth, I think, is now owned by this tiny, tiny, tiny little country, Norway, because their ability, you know, to do that. Think long term, think strategically. It can only be spent, a certain percentage can be spent every year by the government, and it has to be spent on, you know, infrastructure. It's not day-to-day spending. We just frittered ours away. Yeah, there were tax cuts and there's lots of things that were really good under Thatcher, but actually, again, there was a load of free money about which they were able to use, which could have been spent better.
We could do it now. It was obviously better to have done it then, but there's still plenty of oil and gas in the North Sea.
Yeah.
We could still do it for the sake of our children.
Absolutely, we really could. Loads more coming up. Get to more of your calls as well. We're also going to be talking about whether or not the BMA, the Doctors' Union, is a cartel, why working class men are missing out on prostate cancer diagnoses and cures, and also whether or not Baroness Spillman is right or Bridget Phillipson is right in terms of the latest changes to the curriculum. Why are they always changing the curriculum in schools? Can't you just teach kids the basics? I mean, I don't know, a bit of history might be nice without telling us all we're racist. I'd stand for that. Maybe just that would be good enough. Well, we'll talk to Baroness Spillman about that coming up very soon as well. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Henry Hill from Conservative Home is also still with us. Right now, let's talk about what is going on in education with the Conservative peer and former Chief Inspector of Ofsted, Baroness Spielman. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Julia.
Let's talk about Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. You are unhappy with the latest. I mean, every single Education Secretary comes in and wants to change the curriculum, but you're unhappy with what she wants to do. What is it you're unhappy about?
I'm unhappy with taking away the expectation that every child by default should study a broad curriculum to age 16, including not just English, maths and science, but also including a humanity and a language. And I was
by humanity, you mean what, history, geography?
History or geography, typically, yes. And I was prompted yesterday, a really interesting piece of research was put out by More in Common, who polled voters on this and found that right across the political spectrum, there's a very strong consensus that this is what's right for children. In fact, the most strongly supportive are Lib Dem voters. So this isn't a sort of progressive versus conservative divide, traditional divide.
Just sensible.
It is just sensible. So first of all, it makes it a very strange political decision to say, we're going to take that prop out of the system and at the same time loosen the Progress 8 measure so that there's more flex, more ability to drop traditional subjects. It seems to go exactly in the face of public opinion. So I thought I'd look underneath at why the EBAC measure had ever been allowed to be controversial.
Before we go into that, can I just say, I mean, this is something that Michael Gove had brought in, the EBAC, sort of English baccalaureate, and the Education Secretary plans to scrap that. But most British students don't take the English baccalaureate; they do GCSEs.
The English baccalaureate is a performance measure about the set of GCSE.
Right, okay, right.
So it was a performance measure to incentivise schools to make sure that what children chose, and we do give a lot of choice at age 14, fitted that template of a broad and balanced.
Right, so you could only get a score for it if you've got English language and literature, maths, 2 sciences, history and geography, and a language. You've got that broad range, which, by the way, all good schools require of all students.
Well, I mean, good schools require, and it's universal. If you look across at the curricula in all the other education systems that you might compare us with and might admire, it's absolutely standard. There's nothing anomalous about this.
Yeah. Okay. And so the plan to get rid of it, what do you think the motive is behind it? Because it's not good for students. It's not what parents want. Who does want it?
Well, I'm afraid that school sector fought against this measure pretty much from the moment it was introduced. And I was trying to unpack at least one of the likely reasons for that, which tracks back to some mistakes that were made 20 years ago to deem a whole raft of what people call vocational qualifications, so they don't necessarily have any real vocational value, as equivalent to GCSEs. So incentivise schools to steer their pupils towards those instead of taking the more conventional, rather more demanding
academic subjects.
Yeah, the academic subjects.
And basically, does that just make life easier for the teachers? And that's why some of the teaching unions are in favour of it.
It's not so much about making life easy for individual teachers, but it improves the scores that the schools.
So they look better even though they're not achieving. But the reality is, as we know, is that even things like down to sort of having 1 science subject instead of 3 science subjects separate and things like the good schools make sure their pupils do get the full grounding, and it is pupils from poorer areas with families who perhaps don't understand a lot of the importance of these qualifications, and the teachers of the rubbish schools who just don't really care and their heads don't care, and they push a lot of subjects. It doesn't matter what you've studied, it's just the grades that count, but actually it does matter what you've studied.
It absolutely does matter what you've studied. And so my worry is that we'll go further back into a world where too many children are taking courses that won't have any value for their futures. because that's what they've been encouraged to do, because it will make the school look good in performance tables.
Yeah. Again, when I had my goddaughter's being told, oh, it doesn't matter whether you did maths or psychology, it's the grade that counts. I'm like, it absolutely matters whether you do maths. Trust me, one of those is a better exam than the others. And the reality is employers know it, and and universities largely know it as well. Is this part of just the whole sort of dumbing down of education? Because one of the things I really, really loved about Michael Gove when he was Education Secretary was that he was pushing to higher standards for all kids from all backgrounds. Because when you get the same people on the left, you say, oh, isn't it terrible? All these kids aren't getting into Oxbridge or aren't getting this or that job. Well, yeah, they're going to schools which are giving dumbed-down teaching of dumbed-down subjects. And then, of course, therefore, they don't have the opportunity to get ahead. This was about every kid getting the same level of education.
And we should be encouraging children to learn the hard stuff, supporting them in learning the hard stuff and encouraging them to feel proud of learning the hard stuff.
But isn't part of it the patronising idea that, well, young children, they couldn't understand Shakespeare, they couldn't understand Milton, they couldn't possibly understand some of these complicated concepts or languages, and then basically lowering our expectations of what kids can do.
And even worse, trying to narrow it down to what teachers see as relevant to those children's lives, failing to recognise the universality of themes through history in different places, trying to find sort of surface ways. But if we end up in a place where schools think we'll teach working class boys everything themed to football because that's what interests them and engages them, that's the way that you take out all the real meat that's what's capable of transforming those children's lives.
The tragic thing about this is it's going to do the opposite of what those who are kindly thinking they're doing a favour to these kids. This is the opposite of what it will actually achieve.
This is a great example of where what feels kind could be exactly the opposite.
I mean, it is fundamentally very patronising, isn't it? I mean, you've got brilliant head teachers like Catherine Burble-Singh, and, the stats don't lie in terms of what her pupils, who are often from, immigrant homes, parents don't even speak English, they're on free school meals, and yet those kids are just getting places, top grades and getting places at top universities, hand over fist, is that, when you have low expectations of kids, particularly working class kids, and low aspiration for them, then that will be the outcome.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We've got to aspire, and we've got to recognise that it's actually good for young people to have schools expect a lot of them and expect them to work hard. It's so important.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you joining us, Baroness Spillman, Conservative peer, former Chief Inspector of Ofsted. Thank you very much. My God, she did her best at Ofsted to try and keep the sanity going. Henry Hill, what do you make of this?
I mean, I think that the class aspect that you raise is actually incredibly important. Look, I left school in 2008, obviously before the Conservatives came in. I went to a grammar school. If there was anyone at that school taking a BTEC, no one mentioned it, right? Because everybody knew.
Was Latin on the...
no, it wasn't that kind of...
I remember my very first tutorial at Oxford University in philosophy tutorial, and the tutor asked a question in Latin, and I went, I didn't do Latin at my comp, mate.
We didn't have Latin or philosophy, I think. So it wasn't one of those grammars, but it was nonetheless, everyone knew the rules. You're taking your A-levels, you're taking your GCSEs, you're taking your maths and your science and everything else. And yeah, it was often it wasn't the frontline teachers, it was the head teachers, right, who wanted the performance metrics, who shunted people through into a course you could do in a week that counted as 4 GCSEs.
Yeah, but that's it. A lot of these courses, and the thing is, I'm all for particularly, especially I think a lot of young lads wanting practical stuff. They're really bright, they're just not academic, they're bored, but also the feminisation of teaching in our schools, the coursework and all that stuff, it doesn't actually suit a lot of, boys' sort of competitive spirit and the practicality. And I'm being very general, but, generalising is there for a reason. But actually a lot of really practical, physical work and physical, knowledge. This is brilliant. This will get them far better jobs than the idiots doing media studies degrees, for goodness sake. But the reality is, they dumb it down and they go, oh, this is worth, 5 GCSEs. Well, no, it's not that quality.
Well, this is the thing. These were not actual vocational courses. No. A full-on apprenticeship. I think there's a decent age, actually, for boys being able to leave school at 15 in some cases and still learn, but not in an academic environment. But this wasn't that. Real technical education is difficult. It's really demanding.
That's what the Germans have done for years.
This was technical, quote-unquote, education.
Woodwork.
Basically drawn up by people who who weren't vocational themselves. It wasn't the electricians writing the electronics weekend qualification.
Exactly.
And it was grossly overweighted, which meant that if you were a head teacher, you could say, right, you take this thing in IT, you take this thing in plugs, you take this thing in something else. Oh, look, you've got 8 GCSEs.
Lovely. And don't we look like we're a great school?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all just a con. And again, when people talk about, it's terrible, the pressure on kids from these league tables, no. It's all about the teachers and the head teachers. And I'd much prefer a head teacher who was really honest about it and said, no, I'd rather you did a difficult subject that is academically valuable to you in future and not get the best grade in it, but it will still do you better in the long run. That more honesty. We're also going to be talking about honesty in what's going on in the health service with those doctor strikes. Wes Streeting, the health secretary, has called the doctors' union as acting like a cartel. Also going to talk about why working class men are not getting their prostate cancer treatment, being left behind by the NHS. We'll talk to Professor Carol Sikora up next. This is Talk.
We have the most sophisticated counter-terrorism systems and operations.
We don't really.
You're
We've got a
telling me
counter-terrorism review. What?
We can't deal with one lady. We can't monitor and make sure that she's doesn't commit.
Ivan, I'm allowed to say this to you, mate. You're in Dubai. I'm not saying who you represent or how you make your money. I live in the United Kingdom. Our Justice Secretary had to admit yesterday that 91 people have actually escaped from prison in the last 12 months. I haven't got any faith in any systems.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk. 12:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about, well, doctors on strike and doctors not helping working class men needing treatment for pancreatic cancer because, well, they simply don't attend hospitals. I've talked to Professor Carol Sikora, Medical Director of Rutherford Cancer Centres. Good afternoon to you, Carol.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk first of all about Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary. He's been in the news for lots of different reasons this week, but he's accused the striking doctors' union, the BMA, representing resident doctors, as they're now called, junior doctors previously, of behaving like a cartel over their pay demands. And he basically says that that it was time for the BMA to get real. Increasingly clear, he said they're no longer a professional voice for doctors. They're behaving like a cartel, and they threaten not just the recovery of the NHS under this government, they threaten the future the NHS, full stop. And he says it's a morally reprehensible position. Do you agree?
So it is a cartel. Of course it's a cartel. All unions are cartels. That's how they work, whether it's train drivers or doctors. They strive for their members to get the best deal. Whether it's fair that the doctors are going on strike now is another question. And Wes Streeting's handling it, I think, as well as he can. But he's meeting total resistance. And I think the reason for the resistance is not money. It's a complete disillusionment with the NHS and the whole operation of it, the way it works. And the fact that the doctors feel they've been pushed aside. In the old days, we looked after doctors. As a consultant, I looked after a firm of doctors, all greys, and we worked as a team. Yeah. And I knew their first names. They'd come to my house for Sunday lunch now and again. I went to my bosses for Sunday lunch. Yeah. That's all gone. Everyone works 8 hours and goes home. The NHS is not what it used to be. So we have to have different mechanisms to run it. And I think the young doctors see that. And that's why they're choosing to go to Australia, New Zealand, all these lovely places.
Where they're paid more. Is the issue that we do need to pay them more? Look, although they've had in total that 29% pay increase since Labour have come to power, they still say it's still not enough. It's way more than other public sectors of workers have got. But they still say it's not enough to reinstitute their pay they would have been on back in 2008, which is a particular date they've chosen because it makes it look a lot worse than it was. But basically, everyone in the public sector and everyone in the private sector has done badly in recent years because of austerity and then also because of inflation. So, they're not any worse off. But do we just have a problem that actually we need to pay doctors more to keep them?
We have to give them more career options. At the moment, the trouble is, say you want to become an oncologist like me. In the old days, I went to see who I thought were the two top oncologists at the time, a long time ago, Julia. But I went to see them. They gave me a cup of coffee. They gave me 10 minutes at a time. And the guy I wanted to work for said, if I send you an application form for my registrar job, you'll have it in the post. Yeah. If I don't, you won't hear from me again. And that's what happened. I got the application form and started my career in oncology. And the trouble with that, you're in control of your future. Now they're not. I think the difficulty is what impact will it have on the NHS? It's going to be large. 5 days doesn't sound too long, but the roll-on effect of that, especially winter pressures are just building. Yeah. Winter pressures, of course, are an acronym. We know they're there. They're nothing that every year for 50 years we've had winter pressures. Old people get ill with chest infection, and there isn't the capacity to deal with them. And now there isn't the social care capacity to get them out of hospital, so it's compounded by that. Yeah. And there are a lot more old people. So this is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's only going to get worse rather than better, isn't it? And you mentioned, you're an oncologist. That's why I want to talk to you specifically today about prostate cancer. It's been very much in the news. Lots of, prominent people talking about, how important it is we need to tackle prostate cancer. And it is extraordinary, actually, the focus we had in the last 10, 20 years on breast cancer, how we have absolutely driven down the mortality rate from breast cancer because of that awareness and women checking and breast screenings and the like. But there's been a real move to move towards proper prostate cancer screening. And one of the reasons is the new data suggests that it's working class men with prostate cancer who are being left behind by the NHS. What's happening there?
The NHS is a complex system, and more educated people can handle complex systems better than people with poorer education.
You mean sharp-elbowed middle classes?
Exactly. And the other problem is the way around it is to be assertive but not aggressive. And the difficulty, when you have to be nice to the reception, the people that are important in decision-making in the NHS to you are not who you think. They're not the consultants, they're not the senior matron in a hospital. They're the little people that are totally undervalued by everybody. If you're nice to them, or even better, you give them a Christmas card or a bottle of wine to my secretary, it has so much more impact on the patient.
I don't think you should have to do that. Look, I was worked receptionist at a GP surgery where my mum was working after school, and I know how powerful the receptionist is, but I don't think you should have to be, other than, of course, professional and friendly and polite and respectful to people. Absolutely, goes without saying, surely. But isn't it a lot of it the fact that actually, as with all cancers and all long-term ailments, basically middle-class people go to the doctor with any minor ailment, and many people, on a lower income scale, they just don't, and they just go, well, I just feel terrible, and they don't go to see a doctor at all often, sadly, until it's too late. Is that why we need to have screening, so it's just automatically every man will be screened for it in the way that every woman gets screening for mammograms and cervical smears?
Men are much poorer than women at looking after themselves.
They're rubbish.
It's always been the case. They're too stoic. They want to avoid the doctor. With prostate cancer, the average age is 72 when you get prostate cancer, so it is the predominant retired folk. And grumpy old men don't like going to the doctor. Their wives often have to push them. And you see on the referral, the GP said that his wife brought him along to the surgery, and I'm referring him on to you. The men are forced. So why screening is important for men is that it makes them do something about it. It gives them the incentive to actually go and get it sorted out. I think that's the real reason why the campaign is on.
Yeah, indeed. Professor Kowsker, great to get you on. Medical Director of Rutherford Cancer Centre, thank you for that. Just a final word to Henry Hill from Conservative Home, who's been joining me throughout the show. I mean, there really is an issue in terms of, screening. Actually, middle-class areas, doctors are much busier. And hospitals are much busier than working-class areas because people don't get their health checked.
Absolutely. But of course, if we're talking about national statistics, it's also the fact that will include people going private, right? Yeah. And the fact is that if you've got an oversubscribed GP or local service and you can afford to go private, you will have a much better time of it.
Absolutely. It's simple as that. Very delighted to say that Ian Collins is here to tell us what's happening.
I didn't so you're officially a Nepo baby then, because you got the job at the reception when your mum was a GP.
Yeah, I mean, like for 3 weeks, one summer.
I bet you love that, didn't you? Him at 53's got bunions. It must have been fabulous.
There may have been information I was partial to, which I've never divulged.
Obviously.
Because you have
to
a duty
sign the
of
oath
care.
and all that business, even if you were just 6 when you worked there.
It was an eye-opener. It was an eye-opener.
I bet it was.
Put it that way.
I bet it was. We're talking about Starmer, of course, and the troubles going on at Number 10. I mean, you can't